Conference Committee reports on House files.
Conference Committee report on House File number 2887, an act relating to transportation. The report is addressed to the Honorable Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the House, and the Honorable Bobby Joe Champion, President of the Senate. We, the undersigned conferees for House File number 2887, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 5 members on the part of the House and 4 of the 5 members on the part of the Senate. Hornstein moves that the report of the Conference Committee on House File number 2887 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein, who will explain the report.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. Before we get into the debate about the bill, I did want to thank a number of people that have been so instrumental in getting us to where we are today. We have an incredible staff. I know I mentioned them when the bill came off the floor, and I have to say that I respect them even more after what we have done these last couple weeks together. So our fiscal analyst for transportation is Andy Lee. Our research analyst is Matt Burris. They continue to amaze me every day. We have an incredible committee administrator who many of you on both sides of the aisle have gotten to know, Enid Swaggart, our committee legislative assistant, Kevin Petrie. Jennifer Nelson is a first-rate researcher for our caucus. And of course, I've always appreciated the work of Joe Marble, my friend, and he has always been there for us as well in the transportation community. Thank you, Joe. We had great members on our conference committee. This was a bipartisan. We had both parties represented on our conference committee. I want to really thank Chair Cagle. Of course, Representative Cagle is the chair of the Sustainable Infrastructure Committee. I joked with her that she has probably more big provisions in this bill than anyone else. So if we want to get a big job done, you can count on Chair Cagle. Our Vice Chair, Brad Tabke, did incredible work from the beginning to the end this year. Jeff Brand was a very active member of our conference committee, and a special thank you to Representative Petersburg. We have developed a very, very nice friendship over many, many years, and he was an active and involved and engaged member of our committee. You may have seen me huddling with him almost every day here over the last couple of weeks. He introduced amendments and was very engaged in discussion, really helped us on a couple of important issues related to deputy registrars, the Corridors of Commerce program. So thank you, Representative Petersburg, for your friendship and your involvement. So members, we are at a very critical juncture in Minnesota when it comes to infrastructure investments. This bill makes historic, generational investments in our road, bridge, and transit infrastructure and our systems. You know, your constituents know, driving around right now is particularly hazardous. Who in our district doesn't have potholes or broken roads, structurally deficient bridges? We are so far behind in fixing our roads, bridges, and transit systems. So today, we have an opportunity to change that. Decades and decades of neglect. We go big, we go bold, we make this generational investment today. And so I want to just start by talking about some of the history that we're making today, some of the firsts in this bill that we have been waiting, again, decades and decades to achieve, as we have kicked the can down the proverbial road and not stepped up to make these investments. For the first time, members, we have ongoing, dedicated, sustainable line item for small cities under 5,000. Why is that so important? Almost every other city, county, state road gets this dedicated long-term funding. But small cities have been left out. We do it now, finally. And we've had members on both sides of the aisle that have helped get us there. Representative Brand on our side of the aisle, who will talk a little bit more about that, has introduced legislation. Representative Olson, his freshman year, started with a bill on small cities and has helped to see that through. Representative Petersburg's involved with that. Representative Robbins, even from the metro area, has been involved in that. And a number of others, again, have paid attention to this issue. I'm so happy that we finally get this done today. We have a safety problem in our roads and bridges and transit systems. Safety is paramount here. We spend money and resources on a rural highway safety program, We spend money on improving transit safety. Representative Tabke will talk about that. That's a bill that's been floating around for 4 years that we finally get done today. Members, nothing builds our economy and lifts people out of poverty more than transportation investments. I'll never forget a hearing I went to at St. Cloud where someone said, "What good is a job if you can't get there?" So we help people get to jobs. We help businesses thrive and communities grow with a strong transportation and transit system. We create jobs in this bill. 50,000 new construction jobs over the next 4 years with the level of investment that we bring to this bill. So fixing roads, bridges, and building effective and safe transit systems builds our economy and puts people to work. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. We make a serious step forward in this bill thanks to my seatmate, Representative Larry Kraft. We have nation-leading policies that link climate, land use, and transportation in this legislation. And of course, our investments in transit are one of the most effective ways to address the climate crisis and move people around. And I'll say something about transit. The transit investments we make are forward-looking. We invest in microtransit, and we've had several members, including Representative Quam, who's been a leader on this. This is the last mile traveled. The bus drops you off. You need to go a mile or two. We have a van that can pick you up and get you to your destination. That is the future of transportation. We make a big investment in that form of transit in this bill, as well as arterial buses. This is something we agree with on both sides of the aisle. Rapid buses on busy streets, whether it's in greater Minnesota cities or here in the metro area. That's a priority in this bill. And so, members, when it comes to safety, opportunity, jobs, climate, equity, this bill does it all. And there's so many things we do in transportation. I know Representative Nash and I have had conversations about deputy registrars. We address many of their concerns in this bill. We have many deputy registrars, each of us in our districts. That's something that gets attention. And finally, I wanted to thank Representative Torkelson. Representative Torkelson has worked for many years on the Corridors of Commerce program. And again, that says it all, doesn't it? Commerce, jobs, business. And this is a program where we need more regional balance. And so thanks to Representative Torkelson, he's had some great ideas that have never really passed into law here. We've had some issues with the Senate over the years. We get the job done, Representative Torkelson. We have regional balance in the metro area. We have a specific area for those collar counties that are really in need of transportation investments. Hennepin and Ramsey, and then all of the rest of the state are encompassed in Representative Torkelson's ideas and vision. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I know we're going to have lots more conversation. We raise revenue in this bill. I know that many of you are interested in talking about that, and I want to talk about it too. We have the delivery fee, what we call the road maintenance fee, came back from the Senate with a lot less than we had anticipated, and so we needed to make up that money, and we found that indexing of the motor fuels fee was a good way to do that, and we'll have lots of conversation about that. That really, really helps us. That helps us bond. That helps us with the day-to-day maintenance of our road system. We also raise a 3/4 cent sales tax in the metro area for public transit. That is going to fix our transit system that is in desperate need of repair and attention. We will be able to increase ridership and give so many people, from students to senior citizens to people with disabilities, an important transportation choice. So I wanted to include some of our members of the conference committee in terms of opening comments. And the first is Chair Cagle, who has championed and worked harder than anyone else in this chamber, probably harder than anyone else in the entire legislature, in ways that we can access that historic investment that was made at the federal level in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in November of 2021. How is Minnesota going to take advantage of all of those new federal resources? She has championed that. She's going to talk about that, talk about some of our revenue raisers and other great things in this bill. So, Mr. Speaker, we'll hear from Chair Cagle next.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I think the one thing that I want to do is kind of ground us in transportation. I think all of us can agree that us transportation nerds are a special kind of people. And one of the things that why I think transportation is so important is because it touches every part of our lives every day. You can be sitting in your basement, working from home, have your food delivered, have your groceries delivered, have your clothes, everything can come right to you. No matter what we do, our daily lives are impacted by our transportation system. And so that's why this issue is so important to me. It really is about people. And I'm really excited that we were able to get $216 million in local match that goes straight out to local governments and organizations that receive IIJA funding. There's also $2 million in this bill for our locals to get technical assistance. And I think one of the things that we've heard from our locals is that it's difficult to apply for these federal grants. And a lot of our smaller communities don't have the capacity to do that. And so we've also partnered with the U of M to really take a deep dive into small communities, get assistance out there to make sure that they're able to qualify for these federal funding projects, and that the projects that they're putting forward are the very best and most competitive projects that we can put out there. So we're also getting the Northern Lights Expressway. I want to thank all my Duluth friends. I was born in Duluth, and my dad still lives up in Castle Danger, and so my grandma's still up in Silver Bay, and I went to school in Duluth, and I love that city. I love that city. And so I'm so excited that we're going to be able to get the Northern Lights Expressway up to Duluth. And according to the Duluth News Tribune, I was cruising the internet last night and looking at Duluth News Tribune, and then they'll have high quality train service between the Twin Cities and Duluth that generations of Minnesotans will enjoy and benefit from. And then at the 4-to-1 federal match, our $194 million in state funds would give the project nearly $1 billion. We're leveraging our state money for this project, and that's jobs. Those are good paying union jobs for Minnesotans. Another provision in this bill that I'm particularly proud of is the Sustainable Aviation Fuel program. And Sustainable Aviation Fuel, or SAF, is a biofuel used to power aircrafts that has similar properties to conventional jet fuel, but with a smaller carbon footprint. SAF can lower carbon intensity. SAF's lower carbon intensity makes it an important solution for reducing aviation greenhouse gases, which make up 9 to 12% of U.S. transportation greenhouse gases. And planes are hard to decarbonize. Batteries are a little heavy. It's hard to get those things off the ground. But also SAF can help lower greenhouse emissions by growing, sourcing, and producing SAF from renewable and waste resources that can create economic opportunities for farmers, farming communities, and improve the environment, even boost aircraft performance. And so this is really a way for Minnesota farmers to, secure more benefits. And they, by growing biomass crops for SAF, American farmers can earn money during the off-season and providing feedstock to this new market while also securing benefits for their farms, like reducing nutrients loss and improving soil quality. The road maintenance fee is one that I worked on, the delivery fee, and that was, I'm a little disappointed on how it came back from the Senate, but I think it's one of those things that is a new revenue source that will go into the future, even though our gas tax hopefully will be declining in the future as we adopt to EV vehicles. But then on that, we have the indexing. We know gas is not going away anytime soon. I have a gas vehicle, my husband drives a gas vehicle, his work has a gas vehicle, our boats all run on gas. So gas is around for a while, and it's really the workhorse of our transportation system. And we haven't raised the gas tax since 2008. And we know how much products have increased as far as the cost. And so our MnDOT is really getting far less for their money than they had in the past. And so we're really making a huge investment in Minnesota. And these are good paying jobs. This is a way for people to get to work, to get to school, and that's really what this bill is about. This bill is connecting us to our communities in all parts of the state, and I'm extremely proud and really grateful to have worked with such amazing people on this committee, especially Chair Hornstein. I've learned so much from him and just really appreciate his impressions and all sorts of things about Representative Hornstein that I just have learned so much, and I very much appreciate it. And so I look forward to the debate, and thank you guys. Hope you can all support the bill.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill left with $25 million for Highway 65 from the general fund, went over to the Senate, where Senator Michael Kroon amended $56 million in trunk highway bonds. And I thought, wow, I couldn't believe he got that in. Now it comes back from conference with $68 million. So, finally, you're going to hear a little less whining about how awful Highway 65 is. The money we expect to get here and in the bonding bill will get 99th, 105th, and 109th started. It's going to be a total nightmare for Blaine residents while that gets done, but finally, it's going to get done. So I'm very happy with how this bill came back from conference in that sense. There's some other issues that we'll get in, but finally, once all these roads are built, all these intersections are fixed, Highway 65 will not be a black eye for our state when we have the 1,168 teams come and visit the National Sports Center during the USA Cup. So, couple years away, and you can sail through to in around Blaine, and I encourage you all to come up. And I already know people are like, I didn't move into Blaine because I don't want to deal with Highway 65. Well, we're running out of space with 70,222 people, but we can take a few more. 3 years, about. Highway 65 will be a dream. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Scott, Representative Tapke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I first want to reiterate some thanks. So there's been a ton of work that's gone into this bill. This is a generational bill that will change Minnesota forever and the better for our infrastructure, our roads and bridges, and transit throughout the entire state. It hits every single point in the state of Minnesota. I'm really, really proud of that. So first, thank you very much to Chair Hornstein and Chair Cagle for all their work to get us to this point, as well as our staff, Enid, Matt, Andy, and Jennifer for all the work that has been done to get us here. And so there are two main things I want to talk about today that is included in this bill. And so the first one is the policy bill. So we had worked on a lot of policy and some this includes a ton of policy from a lot of folks across the aisle and throughout. So it's got policy provisions from Representative Sensor-Mira. Thank you very much specifically to Representative Bjorn Olson for all the work that we did together for different reporting requirements and farm licenses and those pieces. Leader Dameth is in here, Representative Elkins, Representative Hansen, Representative Petersburg, and Purcell. And so there are a lot of different policy provisions that will really help our state. And so we've got those in here, and then I'm extremely proud of all the work that has been done on transit safety. So we've known for a long time that there has been a major issue coming forward on the safety and the security of our transit system. And as we know, transit is a magnifier. It's a magnet for social issues that we have with regard to mental health, with regard to addiction and homelessness. And we know that our transit system is a magnet for those. And so that it shines a spotlight on what is happening in our society. And so we need to make sure that we are working really hard to help identify what is going on our transit system, to make sure that we are putting as much effort as we possibly can into helping those people who need help, because they show up on our transit system because it's during the winter especially, it's a safe, warm place for people to be, and we need to make sure that we are doing that work. So working together with a significant number of advocates, and so thank you very much to everyone who worked together to get this TRIP program put together. We have a two-phase program that we are working on and that this bill funds. And so the first part is an intervention. And so we are working with NAMI and with the counties and with other folks to make sure that we have an intensive presence for a period of 3 months to get people who need help the help that they need. And so we are making sure to do that so that we aren't just throwing people out onto the streets, that we're actually helping and making sure that we are targeting and getting at the folks who need help. And so that is the first part of it. It's an intensive phase. And then the second part is ongoing, to make sure we never end up in this place again. We had this bill 4 years ago. It was blocked for a variety of reasons, but right now it has been great to have Representative Petersburg working with me on it and with everybody else in this chamber helping move forward. And so we will have what is called a TRIP program, and so it is a way that we have more bodies and more eyeballs on the trains and on throughout the entire transit system, so that people know what the code of conduct is, so that we are referring to the code of conduct and making sure that people are there doing the things that they should be doing. We have folks who will be able to enforce fares, so that we have people riding the train who've paid and those kinds of things. And so it's a really great collaborative program that will help a lot of folks who need help and make our transit system significantly safer than it is today and continue down that path. So thank you to everyone who has worked on that together. And so I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Nicollet, Representative Brand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I stand in delight to talk about the transportation bill. Representative Cagle mentioned being a transportation wonk or nerd. I don't think of myself that way. I think of myself as getting my fair share for my district, and I believe that this bill does it. I believe that this bill gives all of us a fair share of transportation and solves the transportation issues that we have across our state. I think that, first of all, I wanted to talk about the transportation fuel standard. I introduced legislation this year with Senator Dibble to talk about our carbon fuel standards, the carbon emissions that we emit when we drive down the road. And I wanted to do so in a very thoughtful way and have a very thoughtful conversation, folks, about how we address fuels in our state going forward, and how we can actually use our farmers, our farm labor that we have across our state, to also address our transportation fuel standards across our state. Bottom line is, we don't have any oil fields in this state, and so we have to rely on somebody else for the fuel that we drive our vehicles down the road with. Eventually, we will get to a point where we're fully electric vehicles on the roads, but that, I think, and maybe others disagree with me, will take a while for that to happen. In that span of time, we could be setting forth policy, if albeit temporary 50 years, whatever the case may be, where we are addressing our fuel standards in the state of Minnesota, and hopefully we can address this across our country as well, in a way that we're not pulling out the rug out from anybody, that we're allowing our farmers to continue to make some money in the process, but also those folks that are making investments in vehicles that have those types of fuels that we have now, continue to use that investment, but also reduce the carbon load in the atmosphere. So I'm really fortunate that we have some money that we were able to bring to the table, a conversation with our Senate partners, back to the table, a $250,000 study with the governor's office to put together with our stakeholder groups across the state. So that way, next year, when we come back to this legislature, we actually have some thoughtful policy that we can actually address and pass in the legislature. Our Chair Hornstein talked about how we had a safety problem. Yes, we do have a safety problem across our state. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you that in my district alone, we have this road called Highway 14. And a lot of people have perished on that highway, that 2-lane highway that should be a 4-lane highway. And finally, we're addressing that 4-lane highway. We got the money in the 2020 legislature. We actually had to amend session law from 2012 to do it, but we were able to do so to get some federal money to match with our state money. So that way we have Highway 14. It's halfway done. But I will tell you, nothing breaks your heart more than as a representative of this legislature in this state to have to go to a funeral for a constituent who perished on a highway. And I will tell you of one story, a gentleman who he lived in North Mankato. He went to Nicollet to visit his mom, gave his mom a hug, and said, "I'll see you soon. I'm going out. I've got a job opportunity out west. I'm going to go out there." That's where his grandmother lived, and that's where he was going to stay to get that job opportunity. 5 miles down the road, he crashed head-on collision with a semi-truck and perished. That's just one of the many issues that we have across our state when we talk about how we have a safety problem on our highways. How do we afford the fix to those problems if we don't actually address our funding dilemma? And I know sometimes it's a matter of history. The last time we actually passed a gas tax was in 2008. That was when a bridge fell and killed 13 people and scarred a lot of people's lives in the process. This year, we're actually going to index the gas tax to inflation, and it's not going to take a bridge or any other catastrophe to do it, rather just a trifecta. Political will to get this thing accomplished, the thing that should have been done a long time ago. So I thank you very much for having the opportunity to talk about that. Rail safety. This bill has a lot of challenges that we're addressing dealing with rail safety. I live a half a mile from a railroad line that goes to Mankato from Shakopee. And in 2020, when I was a state representative, we had a part of the track was actually washed out. Well, those folks, those two people that were in that train didn't know it at the time, and it was in the middle of the night. And of course, you know, those lights that they have aren't adequate to address something that's immediately in front of you on a track. And I will tell you that that train derailed, and both of the folks that were in that train were injured. One was more injured than the other and was able to go successfully get help. And I will tell you that this issue right here is that we have to have more track safety, and we're addressing this by having more track inspectors. We're addressing this by having a mandate in statute saying that there has to be 2 people in the train. And I think that that's really important. I addressed the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen a couple of weeks ago at their annual conference, and I asked the people in the audience, how many of you have been involved in an accident while operating a train? And everybody in that entire room rose their hand. I followed that question up by saying, how many of you have been involved in multiple accidents in your career? And more than half of the people in that room raised their hands. And it's really important to note that those folks can't carry cell phones. They don't have a way to have conversations with people outside other than a radio. But when the train's tipped over and on fire or whatever the case may be, well, folks, they're not just going to go and talk to their radio operator. They're going to get out of the train, and they're going to go find help. And we've had a rash of train derailments in this state, but also a rash of train derailments across this country. And I'll tell you that we have to be serious when we talk about rail safety. This bill addresses that. It contained within this bill is a bill that we actually passed off the House floor, but weren't able to get out of the Senate floor, and that's dealing with school transportation. Remember those school vans, school SUVs, and school vehicles? And if they're older than 12 years, we have to get rid of those things, even though they might have low mileage, because we're the only state in the country, we're the outlier here, that says that they have to get rid of these decent vehicles. Well, they have to be inspected by the State Patrol annually anyway, but we're eliminating that. We're going to repeal that, so that way schools have the opportunity to save a little bit of money. That's going to impact all of the people across this entire legislature. Small cities money. This is the first time we're actually going to enact money going to small cities, and I will tell you that small cities do not receive 1 penny of the gas tax. They have to rely on their taxpayers or us to pay one-time dollars to those small cities in order for them to do their road improvements. And for those small cities, that is a big expense. We're actually going to invest in our small cities, but also our townships. Folks, I represent a community where farmers grow their wares on the fields, put them into hopper cars, and send them to market. And I will tell you that those township roads are the first mile of delivery of those goods to market is on a township road. This year, we're putting some money into the base in order for townships to also have some of that money to address their roads. Northern Lights Express. Let me tell you how happy I am to see the Northern Lights Express be included in this bill, and I'll tell you why. This is an opportunity for us to have a train to go from the Twin Cities to the Zenith City of Duluth, and that is an amenity. Now, when we have enough amenities that people from other states go, oh, that's kind of neat and interesting, you can actually ride a train to the North Shore. Well, that's pretty cool, and this will create an opportunity for our state, I guarantee you. But also, this gets a project out of the way. So now we can have conversations about rail lines to Rochester, rail lines to Mankato, rail lines across our state. And I will tell you, this is not something new under the sun. 100 years ago, we had rail lines that went to all the major cities across our entire state. That was an amenity. People from St. Paul actually took a train down to Minneopa State Park, stayed the weekend, spent money and took in lodging and had the opportunity to get out of the city and enjoy the Mankato area, and then hop on that train on Sunday and come back to the Twin Cities. But also that allowed people to take those trains to and from these major cities as well, and that was an amenity. And I think that we're missing an opportunity here across our state when we're not investing in our rail service, our passenger rail service. I'm glad to see this in the bill. The aviation fuel standard is really important because this gives farmers a new opportunity to make money on a secondary crop, a cover crop. Cover crops are good for soil anyway, but let me tell you, if they can make some money in the process, wonderful. And if we can reduce the carbon load in our atmosphere, and every plane that leaves Minneapolis Airport is flying fuel that farmers in our state grow, that's even better for our farmers across our state. That's even better for us. And lastly, I will say that, a lot of talk in this body, in this chamber, has been about transformational, and I appreciate that. But we could also use the words interchangeably with metamorphic, cathartic, and life-changing. And I will tell you that those 3 words also are synonyms for transformational, and they also represent this bill. Thank you very much. Please vote green.
Further discussion on the motion to adopt. I recognize the member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think we still are on the motion to adopt, right? I think I heard a lot of third reading speeches here, but this bill really is one of those in which is important. There's a lot of passion on both sides. There's a lot of controversy on both sides of this aisle. And it's a situation where I think it's worthy. This bill is expansive enough that I think it's worthy of a roll call. So I'd like a roll call on the motion to accept.
Representative Petersburg requests a roll call vote. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call vote. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. And of course, I think there's enough issues in this bill that I'm requesting a no vote, but I do appreciate all the good comments that Mr. Chair has. I feel the same way. We are a good team together, but sometimes we disagree. This happens to be one of those times. And so thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Closing remarks, Representative Hornstein.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I would advise a green vote. We have a good debate ahead of us, and appreciate everyone's interest in this important issue.
All those in favor of the motion please click your green button. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 58 nays, the motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, House File Number 2887, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion. I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Members, yesterday I talked about how some people got the gold mine and the charities got the shaft. On the transportation bill, with a $17.5 billion surplus, we're going to raise taxes for transportation by $3.7 billion. When gas tax is going to be added to gas, it's already almost $4 a gallon, and we're adding a gas delivery fee. We're taking trains to nowhere. We're subsidizing more trains to nowhere. Members, it's really simple. This is a bill that takes money from people that are out working, that are driving trucks, that are getting the job done, and we're giving it to people that aren't paying for their transportation. So, just like yesterday, there are some people getting everybody's getting something. In this case, the truck drivers, the people that are like me going back and forth to work at the Capitol here every day and wouldn't be able to take a train even if it did work. We're getting the shaft. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in the local Blaine newspaper, every week they have a section called Looking Back. It's an opportunity for them to reprint articles from the past as kind of a fun way to look back at what was happening in Blaine in years gone by. And a couple months ago, one of the items in the Looking Back section was an article titled, Highway 65 Meeting Had Everyone on the Same Page. It talked about how community members had gathered together for a meeting to talk about the proposed upgrades of Highway 65. It even quoted the former mayor saying, quote, "We all agree that this needs to happen and needs to happen as soon as possible." The date on that article, members, February 28th, 2003. That's right, members. For more than 2 decades, people in my community have been concerned about Highway 65 and pledging that we need to do something. When I ran for office, I declared that inaction at the state level was going to be replaced by action. And today is a very big step in that direction. The $68.75 million for Highway 65 contained in this bill represents by far the most ever legislatively directed funding for this stretch of Highway 65. Since that 2003 article, the legislature has only earmarked $1.5 million for this stretch of Highway 65. This is the most dangerous stretch of highway in the entire metro area. It carries as much traffic as the parallel stretch of 35W, except with stoplights every half mile to mile. This historic funding in this bill, combined with anticipated funding in the capital investment bills, should allow us to begin getting shovels in the ground on this project that many in Blaine started to doubt would ever happen. Now, a legislative victory of this size does not come as a result of just one person. So I want to take a moment to express my gratitude on behalf of my district to those to whom appreciation is due. Chair Hornstein, I want to thank you for putting up with my consistent pestering on Highway 65. I've tried to always stay just on the right side of annoying, and hopefully I hit my mark. But you've listened to the needs of my community. You even came to a town hall specifically focused on transportation to hear about this issue. I want to thank you for responding to the needs of our community and your vision to see that this plan for Highway 65 is about how we create a multimodal highway for the 21st century. Chair Cagle, I know that this project has been a labor of love for you. This stretch of highway used to be in your district, and now after redistricting, you represent an area just to the south, but even though you represent some new constituents, you haven't forgotten the needs of your old constituents. And it's been such a pleasure to partner with you. I appreciate your advocacy on the conference committee to work behind the scenes to make sure that we were able to finally get this funding over the hump. And I want to thank my DFL colleagues. It didn't take long for me to get to be known within our caucus as the Highway 65 guy. Over time, so many of you took a personal interest in making sure I was able to deliver on this for my community. I'm incredibly grateful that our caucus has elected to make this such a priority in this bill. Maybe it's just so you can hear me talk about something other than Highway 65, but words and dollars on a page don't become law without votes. And so on behalf of the people of Blaine and Lexington, thank you. Thank you for putting forward the votes to make possible this day that people have been talking about for 20 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on the transportation bill today. This is, and Representative Hornstein, I have to say, you are one of the nicest and best people here in the legislature, so please don't take anything that I'm about to say personally. I love you. I think you're wonderful. Your work product, however, I think needs a little more attention. No, I'm teasing you a little bit. I do appreciate working with you, and you are always willing to listen when needs arise. But I think this bill is just absolutely out of touch with where we are in this state at this time and in this budget. Yesterday, I stood on the House floor and said that Democrats were passing a bill that was the largest tax increase in state history. That record stood for 24, not even 24 hours, because we passed it in the evening last night. This bill is the largest tax increase in state history. New record holder right here. And I'll remind folks at home, and I appreciate Representative Hornstein's comments and others about the condition of our roads and how they need the attention and the potholes. Don't let them lie to you. We are collecting enough money right now to fix our roads and bridges, without question. We have a $17.5 billion surplus right now. But if we would focus that money on our priority, not just the surplus, but the money that we're actually currently spending. If we'd focus that on our priorities, we could fix these roads. But instead, we're wasting it on all of these trains and crap that don't work. They're way too expensive, and we do not need. And this bill doubles down. So do not let a pothole on the road be the excuse that Democrats can try to convince you that they need more of your money. They do not need more of your money. And this bill is absolutely shameful. This bill is a $3.7 billion tax increase. That's on top of the $17.5 billion surplus we already have in the general fund. This bill is more than a 30% increase in license fee tabs, or license tab fees. So when you buy a vehicle, whether it be new or used, for the life of that vehicle, you will be paying at least 30% more to register that vehicle in this state. In the metro area, you will pay a 3/4% sales tax increase on everything you purchase in the metro area. 0.75% increase, 83% of that money is going to go to transit. A 50-cent delivery tax on everything that you have delivered to your home. 50 cents, the highest in the country, and I think it's twice as high as the next closest state. Delivery tax, this one's the one that's going to bankrupt me. But it's also just so out of touch with where we're at right now. And not to mention the gas tax. And I know there's a number of members in this chamber over the course of their tenure here who have voted for big tax increases in our gas tax in the past. And there are some who have voted to index it to inflation. And then right before the election, they introduced a bill and did a press conference calling for a gas tax holiday so they could tell their constituents that they were going to reduce gas taxes in the state of Minnesota. But now we get to see that that was all just for the cameras. That was just to fool the voters. Because now we're actually increasing the gas tax and indexing it to inflation, so it'll just be on an automatic increase in perpetuity. So all those members who said they were going to vote to reduce the gas tax lied to you. And they did it so that you'd vote for them. And I hope you remember that the next time they're running for re-election. This sort of behavior is absolutely shameful. But it's what Minnesotans can expect of Democrats in this state. But the good news is Democrats have told us they're only going to tax the rich, right? Nope, they actually removed the taxes in these bills for the rich. Now they're only taxing everyone. These taxes are the most regressive taxes you could put in place, which means they're going to impact low-income Minnesotans more than high-income Minnesotans. So who gets left holding the bag when Democrats are in control? You do. These are literally, and I used to say that it was the gas tax and the cigarette tax were the two most regressive. Then you've thought of some things I never even could have thought of. The delivery tax. Seniors are going to get hit by this. Folks that have mobility issues, handicapped and other mobility issues that can't get out of their home, those are the people that are going to pay this tax. People who maybe don't have a car or don't live in an area where they've got transit readily available, that rely on getting things delivered to their home. Those are the people that are going to be impacted by that delivery tax. These are literally the most regressive taxes you could put in place. Is that what you want? On top of the $17.5 billion of surplus that you already have that you could spend, Democrats are raising in this bill another 3.7, but all totaled up another $9.5 billion of tax increases. Many of them the most regressive tax increases you can put in place. So they're going to impact low-income Minnesotans the most. How proud are you of your work now? You couldn't just say no to a few people? Like, you know what? Maybe we don't need to increase the spending in this budget by 27%. Maybe we could get by with just, 8%, which probably is still too much. Or maybe we could take the money we already collect and we could use it much more efficiently and effectively instead of wasting it on these rail projects to nowhere. I talked for years about North Star commuter rail up to St. Cloud, or not to St. Cloud, to Big Lake. I guess now this bill, maybe they're going to study expanding it to St. Cloud, so we're going to waste more money on that. And I used to say that somebody who was buying a ticket, from Big Lake or Elk River or Anoka, that they were paying about $8 I think it's $4 per direction or $8 round trip. I might be wrong on that. And that price might be 10 years ago. I don't remember. But they were paying, I think, about $8 round trip. And the state was paying $44 per person as the subsidy each way, or $88 round trip. So we're paying the state, this was 10 years ago. We were paying $88 per person per day to transport somebody to their job. $88. We could have leased every one of those people a brand new Mercedes-Benz, paid for all of their gas, and still had money left over. That's how inefficient this train is, and that's how inefficient government is at solving problems. But it gets worse. That was 10 years ago. The ridership on this train has plummeted. It's actually close to $1,000 per person per day. And I'm not kidding. $1,000 per person per day to move somebody from their community into Minneapolis to go to work and back. We could lease a helicopter to pick them up in their yard and bring them to their office and then return them in the afternoon. That's how inefficient this program is. And what's Democrats' answer? Double down, we need more trains. I've given Frank a hard time in the past that if we love trains so much, I love trains, I do. I collect them. I have model trains at home. Frank, sometime I'm gonna show them to you. They're very cool. I love them. I'm a little bit of a kid at heart. But I get that fix out of my system at home playing with model trains that might cost me a couple $100 instead of a couple $100 million or $2 billion to build. This is not an experiment that this state can afford. And by the way, it's not really an experiment anymore. We know it's a failure. Trust me. We should shut the doors and walk away from Southwest Light Rail right now. Mark my words that I said that. If we walked away from it, shut it down right now, we'd be money ahead. I hope you all had a chance to look up the rail project in Hawaii that now isn't supposed to open until 2030 something. It actually has been under construction so long, they had to redesign it halfway through construction because the technology changed. And it's, I don't know, I think it's $13 billion over budget. Southwest Light Rail is now, I don't even have the number, at least $1 billion over budget and maybe more. $1 billion over budget. And how many years passed? 3 years overdue now? We're going to look like Hawaii soon without the weather. And you're going to wish you'd have, I warned you 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, and I'm warning you now. Cut your losses. It's that bad. And what are we going to do in this bill? We're going to double down on the blue line, the line that nobody wants. And we're going to invest money in the train to Duluth. And the train to Duluth, you know what the benefit of the train to Duluth is? If you want to get to Duluth and take more time than it takes to drive, the train will actually do that for you. So if you really don't care about your efficiency and you want it to take more time to get to Duluth than it would driving there, that train is the answer. Yep, $194 million. That's what we're spending. $1 billion total. It's an absolute waste of money. And at some point, somebody needs to stand up and say, you know what? Didn't we learn our lesson from these other rail projects? And the answer to that, apparently, from Democrats is no. So, members, obviously the Democrats are drunk with power and an insatiable thirst to spend. And they are, you know, somebody's going to add this all up. Somebody's going to, I was on Twitter last night, which I don't do a lot of because it raises my blood pressure and I don't think it's good for me. But I was on Twitter last night and I happened to see a tweet by the DFL party of Minnesota that yesterday they passed the largest tax cut in history. And I think I figured out the problem. Democrats can't read a spreadsheet. Literally the largest tax increase in state history, and the DFL party is lying to Minnesotans on a tweet yesterday saying that this was the largest tax cut in state history. Are you kidding me? There's $9.5 billion of tax increases in these bills. $9.5 billion. That's 20% of our general fund budget. Now, not all these tax increases are in the general fund, and that doesn't take into account the $17.5 billion surplus that is the taxpayers' money. So what you did before the election is you said you were going to give a $2,000 check back to Minnesotans. And at the time that that was spoken, that $2,000 check back to Minnesotans would have been about half of the surplus. But the surplus at that time was $9 billion. Now it's double. And at that time, it would have only taken up about half the surplus to give a $2,000 check back. So you could give an $8,000 check with the surplus back to Minnesotans, every Minnesotan, or whatever your formula was, most Minnesotans. An $8,000 check per Minnesotans. That's the surplus. That's what we could have done with it. And voters were such a priority for Democrats that Democrats are giving them $260. But you know what? Somebody's going to add it up. Somebody's going to add all of this stuff up and say, what is this going to cost the average Minnesotan? The ones that you tried to buy off with a $260 check. I'm going to get that number. I'll bet you Minnesotans are going to pay on average, well, I think we can kind of assume, right? Let's do a little math together. If $17 billion would have been an $8,000 check per Minnesotan, then adding another $9.5 billion of tax increases to get us to $17 billion would be $12,000 per Minnesotan. So you're going to give them $260, and you're going to take $12,000 per Minnesotan. Now, that's not all the tax increases. That's the surplus plus the tax increases. But the tax increases are $4,000 per Minnesotan, according to that quick back-of-napkin math. So you're giving them a $260 check in one pocket and patting them on the back and say, oh, you know, we appreciate you so much. We're just doing such great things here. We're going to give you $260. And out of the other pocket, you're taking $4,000 per person. In new tax increases, $4,000 per person. That's what you're doing. And you didn't need the $4,000 because you already had $8,000 per person of surplus money. I might stop talking on the House floor, and I assume that'll get a round of applause, because it raises my blood pressure. You obviously don't listen. You have no shame. Frank, you listen. I appreciate it. I do really like you, Frank. And I hope you will. I hope you'll come up and see my trains sometime. And let's get it out of your system, too, because we don't need more real trains in the state. So, members, the bottom line here is this bill is terrible. And yes, it does fund some really great projects. I was the Speaker of the House for 4 years and a legislative leader here for 10 years in the legislature. I never once have had a bonding project in my district, never once. I never stuck a, I mean, that ought to mean something. I never once stuck a project in a bill for my district. I stuck a heck of a lot of projects in bills for Highway 65 and for Highway 10, so you're welcome for that, the members that, you know what, but that's where the need was. Because we have to look beyond our own self-interest, and we have to do what's best for the state of Minnesota. And these trains and this gluttonous spending is not what's good for Minnesota. You know, raising taxes $4,000 per Minnesotan. That's not good for Minnesotans at a time when they're reeling from the highest inflation in their lifetime. Democrats want to take another $4,000 out of every Minnesotan's pocket, but we're going to give you $260. Smile and pat you on the back and say, please vote for us next time. I don't think Minnesotans are going to be fooled by that. So when Minnesotans need help because they can't afford their everyday necessities, and interest rates have more than doubled since a year ago, all because of these terrible policies, you are doubling down. And I have no idea what this is going to cause. I mean, we know what caused the inflation that's already there. I have no idea what this doubling down is going to cause in our state. But Minnesotans can't afford it. And here I am, standing up for the low-income Minnesotans who are going to be affected the most by this. These are the most regressive taxes you could put in place. More than a 30% increase in your registration fees for your vehicles. 75 cents on every dollar, or excuse me, 0.75%, let me say it that way. Thank you, Frank. 0.75% sales tax increase, and there's another quarter in another bill, I think, for housing, right? So it's a full percent in the metro area sales tax increase. 83% of this 0.75% sales tax is going to go to transit in the state of Minnesota. Transit that is a failure, that costs too much, it's inefficient, nobody rides it, it's not good, it's not a good idea. The ones we have right now are failing. And they're not failing because we don't have more, they're failing because it's not what people want. They're not flexible. It's not the future. This is 1800s technology, 1700s technology to solve a modern problem. The future is a vehicle that will pick you up at your door in the morning, drive you to work while you sit in the passenger seat and you work all day. It'll drop you off at your office if you want it to, and then it will go and give other people rides around town. And then it will come back and pick you up, and it will take you home. And then you'll put it in your garage and you'll recharge it overnight. That's the future, and that's actually like 2 or 3 years away. I actually had a chance to ride in one a week or 2 weeks ago. Fully autonomous. You call the vehicle up on the app, it came and picked me up. I got in the vehicle, there was no driver. Took me on a little drive, drove me around, brought me back. No driver in the vehicle. That's the future, not a train that's stuck on a track that we can't move, that costs way too much money. And Democrats want you to believe that they need these tax increases because there's potholes. There's potholes because we've had mismanagement of our current funds, because we're stretching our priorities too thin and we're investing in these trains that don't work. That's the problem. So I hope Minnesotans will pay attention, because this is not the sort of thing that we need in this state, and it is incredibly out of touch. And I think we're at the precipice of an economic downturn, and if we aren't, this certainly will cause it. The gluttonous tax increases in these bills are so out of touch, but I know Minnesotans are paying attention. They're not going to be fooled by a $260 rebate check when you're taking $4,000 per person out of their pocket in brand new taxes. So, members, please vote against this bill. And Frank, I appreciate you as a person and appreciate the work you do, and I hope we can work together in the future, and you can rest assured I'll be advocating that we do things a little more efficiently. But thanks, members. Please vote no.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
This way. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I've been asked by many in northern Minnesota, what is this like, these omnibus bills? It's my first term. It's a very good question that I say. Well, the best way to describe this session, I've come to realize, is describing a well-known card game that I hope some of you played, the game of hearts. Because this session is like running the card game. And a few card players are looking around and they're realizing, can anybody stop them? Because soon enough they've realized, they're shooting the moon. That's what they're doing here. So you look at your cards when you're playing the game of hearts, and you realize, oh my gosh, those cards have been played, every one of them. And then you realize they have the king, they have the queen, and we've got a stacked hand. In Minnesota, that's what we got right now. That is exactly what we have, the game of hearts, except here we have multiple omnibus bills that are going to pass party line. This one's going to be no different. And to Representative Doubt's point, I too appreciate Representative Hornstein. He's been great to work with. And, you know, as we get to the end, I think it's important to realize when you take over leadership with a record surplus, a record for Minnesota, not for me as a first-time elected official, not for you if you've been here 10 years, a record surplus for Minnesota. When you do that as a leader, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility, and you took a record surplus and then you added on another $9.5 billion in taxes, and this transportation bill is 3.5 of that. And it's cleverly called all kinds of things. Fees, registration increases. At the end of the day, it really means you're going to have less money. So one could say you played Minnesota's hearts. And it's going to look a lot different than the game of hearts. where you just you shot the moon. So Minnesota hearts are going to be broken, and why could that be? Because the reality comes down to basic common sense. If businesses don't build and they don't invest in Minnesota, the Democrats gambled that those who won't leave, many of those who could leave, won't leave this state. They're gambling on that. The majority party is talking trains, planes, and automobiles. Planes, trains, and automobiles. I love that movie. It was a comedy. This is not a comedy. This is Minnesota's future that's on the line here. So we got a $194.7 million train going to Duluth, and more money for trains in this budget. Do we really need this? I didn't have one person when I was door knocking from Two Harbors, Hermantown, Proctor, and all the townships that surround Duluth ever asked me about the train to Duluth, except one county commissioner in St. Louis County. That's it. One county commissioner came to see me. That's the facts. I've lived there for 30 years. I've heard about this train, heard a lot of rumblings about the train, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's the priority right now. I haven't changed my mind. The majority party has forgot that all Minnesotans still care about crime. And this has been the session of the criminal, the session of soft on crime. And the Crime Watch, now that I've been living in Minneapolis area for the last 5 months, I follow it. And a lot of other people do, and in every other community. They're watching it. You can see everything. So they're not going to put their kids, their spouses, their families, their college students at risk when they can clearly see criminals aren't being prosecuted. It's not happening. Yesterday, we talked about another bill, and we've had multiple bills be talked about from prosecutors in the room. But the fact of the matter is we're not penalizing crime. So if you're not safe, you're not going to ride a train. It's common sense. Minnesotans still have common sense. There's no money for police officers, peace officers, whatever we want to call them, the people that we know are going to keep us safe. We're going to have social workers and ticket checkers for trains. That's not going to give people comfort in the environment we're in right now, because that wasn't the environment decades ago, but it is today. The majority party forgot that rebate checks are going to go by fast, and people will spend them fast. And then the sting of the long-term reality, because their electric bills are going to go skyrocketing like California, like Germany, who's firing up the coal plants right now. They're going to linger. And then they're going to realize when they go get their car tabs done, or they register their vehicle, or they want to order food, or they want to order anything, that there's taxes and fees that they never paid before because they're not this dumb. They are smarter than this. They're going to realize that they're going to have to get the fourth job probably now. So we're not looking out for the low-income people. We're hurting them. We're hurting the elderly who are living on fixed incomes. We're hurting everybody. And it's gas tax, delivery tax, tabs, registration for your vehicle tax, whatever you want to call it, it's all going up. So the Senate just recently earmarked in this transportation bill, we have roads, bridges. It's all great. We've got billions of cash this year, people. Highway 61 is going to get the $11 million in the district I'm in. I'm thrilled about that. We should be doing basic things of the roads, the bridges, when you've got a $17.5 billion surplus. It's common sense. We can celebrate it, but at the end of the day, whoever is the leader, regardless of party, that's the right thing to do. Roads, bridges, it's all what everybody in Minnesota wants. Take care of those things. And I even think it's great we got a helicopter and a plane for the State Patrol. They need it too. So there goes the plane. I'm for that, for the record. Raising taxes when you shot the moon. That's the part that's problematic for me. That's the problem that's going to be problematic for all of Minnesota. So members, I'm going to vote no. My district's going to win, your district's going to win, but at the end of the day, we're all going to lose when they shot the moon. We started with a $17.5 billion surplus. And guess what? A lot of people that had that, they won lotteries. We've already heard in this session what we all know, that many of them ended up bankrupt. And I'm going to hope that Minnesota doesn't follow that trajectory to end up bankrupt. I would be thrilled to be proven wrong. And I will say if I was wrong. If we thrive as a business, it is best for Minnesota. If people move into this state, like I'm being told, we're going to thrive, we're going to have money coming in buckets, I'm going to be rejoicing. And I'll say Representative Zalesnikar from Friedenberg Township misspoke, because we have a budget surplus that's now $30 billion. We just prospered. Kids are thriving, but unfortunately, I think we played craps. We just blew billions. So I'm voting no.
The member from Martin, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. I just got to tell a really quick story, and then I'll sit down quick. I knew that the state of Minnesota was in real trouble early this year. When I had just walked out of the tax committee, I went onto the second floor, so I thought I was in a safe place. I turned the corner, and I really loudly asked the question of my LA. I said, is there anything that the state of Minnesota doesn't already tax? And it turns out I wasn't really in a safe place, because one of my DFL colleagues was right there. They turned around, and they very loudly proclaimed, yeah, we don't tax we don't tax clothing. I think that's what they said. And I said, oh, but wait, we've actually made a decision, a conscious decision not to tax that. I'm talking about something completely new, something that's never been taxed before and never thought about. And their response, very concerning, was, well, if you think of one, let us know, and we'll tax it. I'm not kidding. That was the conversation. This is an insatiable appetite for raising taxes in the state of Minnesota, and it is a problem. It will become a problem. We are raising taxes on everything, to include things that I can't even imagine before I got here this year. The idea that we're going to tax delivery fees, which, remember, the vehicle that's delivering it has already paid a fee for the registration, it's already paid a fee for the gas, it's already paid the fee for the sales tax, but wait, we're raising the sales tax, we're raising the registration fee, we're raising the gas, and now we're raising a completely new concept here of a delivery fee. And we talk about all this, and this is the thing that I find so hilarious, is we talk about these regressive taxes, sales tax, the most regressive tax. And then I hear from the other side of the aisle, we don't like regressive taxes. And Minnesota's got some of the most progressive taxes in the country. And then people come in and they say, but the ends justify the means. We pick the pockets of the poorest, but the ends will justify the means. That's what I keep hearing. Members, I am incredibly concerned here. You should be concerned here, and it concerns me that you're not concerned here. Members, this is a punch in the nose and a punch in the gut for every Minnesotan. They will feel this, and they will feel it every day, because it's kind of like that meme from Star Wars. It's a trap. There's no way that you can get away with not paying this. There is no way. Just think about it. Sit at your home and do nothing. You still can't get away without paying this tax. I mean, let's be real. Income tax. If you don't want to pay income tax, we have a lot of people who don't. You just don't need to work, or just don't make enough money to pay income tax. That's a way out if you don't want to pay the tax. But you have constructed something that is impossible to not have to pay. So if that's your goal, congratulations, you've done it. This is a trap. It will hurt Minnesotans. If we have 12 cents in our pockets at the end of the day, we may have just one. Members, vote no for this. Because Minnesotans, although we talk about all the roads that we want and all the potholes that we want to fill, if we had a little less taxes, we could have a little less spending, and I think everyone would be okay at the end. Because in this instance, I don't think we'll be okay. Members, please vote no.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I want to thank Chair Hornstein and all the members of the conference committee. This bill. It's a great bill, and it's a courageous bill. You didn't have a situation where there's a surplus. There's actually a structural deficit in transportation. And I, for one, didn't come to this legislature to push away hard problems. So thank you for your leadership. I'm going to focus most of my comments now on the area of reducing transportation greenhouse gas emissions and addressing climate change. There are 3 points that I want to make. Number one, transportation emissions are the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. 2, to address them long term, we have to think differently, and doing so has enormous benefits. So first, transportation makes up 25% of our greenhouse gases in Minnesota, and more than 70% of that amount comes from passenger vehicles and trucks. Next, thinking differently means realizing that electrifying vehicles is necessary but not sufficient. Given how long it will take to fully electrify or decarbonize passenger vehicles, we're going to have polluting fossil fuel-based cars on our roads for decades to come. And even for electric vehicles, electricity from the grid won't be carbon-free until 2040. So we need to plan our transportation infrastructure and our communities to reduce how much we have to drive to live our lives. This bill does so in 2 key and really groundbreaking ways that I've been proud to work on. Starting in February 2025, MnDOT will have a process in place to assess capacity expansion projects on its network, and if a project is going to increase greenhouse gases or vehicle miles traveled, then offsets would need to be found, either within the project itself, within the region, or somewhere else around the state. There's a special focus on looking for offsets in historically disadvantaged communities. Additionally, MnDOT will create appropriate regional targets for greenhouse gas and VMT reduction, and then in the metro area, Met Council will incorporate these targets into regional climate action planning with a focus on land use. Then these considerations will be built into the 2050 comprehensive planning process, which all cities in the region will start working on in earnest in 2026. What's awesome about doing this, and is another example of a clean little secret of climate policy, is it has huge additional benefits. Now, we're a car-centric society. That's not going to change anytime soon. There's a lot of pain we put up with because of it. Financially, it costs on average over $10,000 per year to own a car. Air pollution from gas vehicles contributes to about 4,000 unnecessary deaths every year in Minnesota. There are close to 400 traffic fatalities every year. And do you know that you are 17 times more likely to die in a car as in a train? And by the way, it's not to mention positive impacts possible for our communities when people are out of their cars and interacting more frequently. There's a reason that road rage is a thing and sidewalk rage isn't. A few weeks ago, Rocky Mountain Institute released a study about Minnesota that quantifies the benefits from the approach embodied in these policies. Between now and 2050, if MnDOT can reach its goal of a 20% reduction in vehicle miles traveled per capita, it would directly save Minnesotans a total of $91 billion, in excess of $5 billion per year by 2050 of health, safety, and vehicle operation costs. And this doesn't even count indirect benefits involving the social cost of carbon, which could almost double that amount. Now, I want to specifically thank people that have reached out to me, challenged me with concerns about these policies. I've spoken with MnDOT, Met Council, Move Minnesota, city and county engineers, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, really anyone that has wanted to weigh in on this. And those conversations have made these better policies. I also know that some of this stuff can sound like it's focused on metropolitan areas. And while it's true that metropolitan areas likely have more potential for reducing things like vehicle miles traveled, there can and must be benefits for more rural areas of our state. Offsets can include more green space. Land use can mean thinking about how we make small towns more vibrant and able to satisfy more of people's everyday needs. In closing, I'm excited about this bill for so many reasons, and the climate policy aspects to it in particular, because we are meaningfully addressing the #1 source of greenhouse gases in Minnesota. We're doing it by changing how we're doing things relative to highway expansion and land use. And doing so not only helps our fight against climate change, but it will save money, save lives, and make our communities stronger. So vote green.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker and members. I have a couple of comments on the bill, but first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation and thanks for a provision in this bill that's near and dear to me. It's a provision that honors the memory of Pope County Deputy Sheriff Josh Owen, who was killed in the line of duty a couple of weeks back. And there was such an outpouring of support for his family, and it was just amazing. And shortly after the funeral, there were comments made, questions asked, what can we do to honor his memory? And the idea that folks came up with was to name an overpass just north of Glenwood in his memory. And it's fitting because the overpass, which was done with bonding dollars, by the way, was one of the main reasons it was done was to help our law enforcement, EMTs and fire people respond more quickly to calls they may have north of that area. Because in Glenwood, it's a major rail line for the CP rail, and the trains are put together and such. And trains are slowing down or speeding up going past this highway area. So the overpass was badly needed, and it's a safety aspect, so it's fitting to honor Josh Owen's memory by naming this overpass in his honor. So thanks to Chair Hornstein, Lead Petersburg, and the members of the conference committee for including this kind of a late addition, but again, appreciations to you. Now for comments on the transportation bill. You know, I've been here a while, and going back, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, we had what we called, half jokingly, the road ditch conflicts. Farmers wanting to mow road ditches, MnDOT saying, no, you can't without a permit and a special colored vest and things like that, liability insurance. That all kind of went away. There was a lot of stirring debate here on the House floor over those issues. Farmers had been mowing their ditches for years and years, and I think it was a situation of a solution looking for a problem. But my goodness, it's back again with a program called Habitat for Highways, $1 million in funding for fiscal year 2024. And I just have to ask members, in all seriousness, do you really want our road ditches to be wildlife habitat? It's not safe. You can have deer nesting in tall grass, or raccoons, or skunks, pheasants, whatever. A lot of wildlife in our rural areas. And if the ditches are not maintained, it provides cover. You can't see these things coming up. And motorcycle driving, for example, dangerous if deer are crossing, especially at night. So because of a safety aspect, and also farmers appreciate being able to get some feed and for their cattle and livestock operations. And I suspect MnDOT thinks it may be okay as well because it saves them some money. They don't have to take care of cutting these road ditches when the farmers take care of them themselves in the areas adjacent to their land. So again, just have to wonder why we're going back to the wars on ditch mowing when it seemed to be working itself out and working pretty well out in greater Minnesota. And my last comment, Madam Speaker, a provision in the bill that is going to be providing incentives to buy electric bicycles. Now, I like to ride bike as well as anybody, and the old bicycle, it's not a Schwinn, but it's an older one. It doesn't pollute anything. It's pedal power. And now we're incenting people to buy an electric bike, and that means buying a battery, recharging it, and it just seems to be kind of going against the grain here of lower carbon emissions, lower pollution, to incent people up to the tune of $1,500 to buy an electric bike. Certainly a provision that could very well have been not included in this bill. So for those reasons, Madam Speaker and members, a lot of excessive spending in light of our big budget surplus. I too recommend a red vote on this transportation bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Spencer Mora.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Just want to say thank you to Chair Hornstein for your leadership on the committee, for working tirelessly to put together what I think is a really good bill. And I know that speaking for the constituents in my district really represents what my constituents want for the future. Just a few things that I want to highlight. 5/6 of 3/4 is what I've been hammering Chair Hornstein about this whole time. But the Metro sales tax is a historic investment in our public transportation. We have never seen this in our state, and this investment is absolutely coming at the right time. So thank you for really holding on that line. I know that is something that transit advocates were really pressing for, and you really came through on that. Sydney Jordan has an amazing provision related to a free fare pilot program. I think we are thinking a lot about how do we make our public transportation efficient, how do we make it accessible, and how do we deal with some of the equity concerns we have. I'm really excited for that pilot. I know that a potential line through my district is up for potentially being a part of that, and I think that could be huge in the way that we think about transit. We know that cities across the U.S. And across the world are investing in free transit, and I think that that's a future that we really need to think about. A small thing is the Midtown Greenway extension study. So this is a potential way to connect a bike trail in Minneapolis and St. Paul that goes through my district, something that advocates have been asking for a long time. And then finally, I wanted to just tell a quick story. I think Larry Kraft has an amazing provision here that's about a really, really big way that we can think differently about transit and how we can think differently about how transit is really contributing to some of the biggest crises that we're facing around climate. But I wanted to just tell a story about a very small provision in here that I think gets at the same equity concerns. So there's a provision in here about better training for Metro Transit bus drivers related to supporting passengers that are handicapped or disabled as they're getting specifically on and off the bus. And this came to me through one of my constituents. So I have a constituent, Joy. I think she is 85, and she really told me from the beginning when I was running, get this bill passed this session. I might not be here after this session, and I really want to see it passed. I think she wrote me upwards of maybe 10 letters when I was on the campaign trail. And then January 3rd, after we got sworn in, I got back to my office. I had 2 voicemails from her. I had 2 emails from her just to say we have to get this passed. So she was a bus rider. She has been a long-time bus rider. She's someone that doesn't have a car. She's someone that cannot use a car. So transit is her only way around. She's came to the Capitol multiple times to testify and tell her story. It takes her upwards of 2 hours to get here from South Minneapolis, from where she lives. But she was, on a snowy day getting off the bus at 38th and Chicago in Minneapolis, and the ramp did not fully go down. And so her wheelchair got stuck, it fell over, and she suffered a traumatic brain injury. And since then, she has just been on a journey to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. So, there are folks out there, I hear a lot of talk, I think specifically from the other side, about this idea that we kind of just need to abandon public transportation. And, I hope that stories like Joy, stories that we heard in committee show us, there are folks that can't drive a car because they can't afford it or they are not able to. And so we can't just abandon those folks. We need to be investing in the system. It is the right thing to do, both on a really individual, personal level, but also because of the choices that we're going to need to make with climate moving forward. So this is a future-looking bill. I think we can all feel really good about voting green today. And if for nothing else, vote green for Joy. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I didn't know I was that close to the list. Well, if you subscribe to the Father Flanagan rule of bills, not every bill is all bad. This has some things in it that I think are quite good. And Chair Hornstein, I want to first appreciate the collaboration that we had on making sure that the Met Council does never repeats what they did in the Southwest Light Rail debacle. And I don't think you mentioned it during your intro, but I think that it's going to be well received, not just by people here in the legislature, but by people around the state. You know, you've received probably more emails than I have on just what a dumpster fire that whole thing has been, and the OLA report confirms that. And I will again reference, you and I sat, I think it was in the Senate, I think because, I remember that because there was a wig powdering station over on the side, that we sat in that meeting and we heard that there was going to be that pile driving project, and both of us looked at each other at the same time, like, oh, that doesn't sound like it's a good thing. Turns out we were right. And I'm glad that we are going to be doing some investigation and planning on how to never let that happen again, and really look at ways to genuinely overhaul how the Met Council operates. So I am grateful for that. I will also say that I am grateful that I was able to work with you for 9 years now to impress upon you the need to invest in Carver County and Highway 5, and I'm grateful for that, and I think that's going to be a very good thing. So reminding people that there are roads outside of the 494 ring. I mean, for some of you that may be a shock, because there are, and I think that's a good thing. I am grateful that there are the corridors of commerce that you are investing in as well, because much like 212, and we've paid attention to 212 as of late, but there are needs for corridors of commerce that are not inside the 494 ring. However, I think it was Senator Rest that mentioned that today's DFL has an insatiable appetite for taxes, and then this bill is proof of that. There's a delivery tax, and there are gas taxes, and there are fees, and all sorts of other delightful things that get tucked into nooks and crannies in the bill. And that's going to be problematic in the long run. I think that the rolling number is $3.7 billion. Thank you, confirming $3.7 billion. I got it right. $3.7 billion in, you call it new revenue or revenue raisers. And just to level set that for people who are watching on TV on this beautiful Sunday when you could be outside, kudos to you for being at home watching this. They're not. Let's just be really honest, they're not. But when they watch this tomorrow, because they feel like getting depressed, they will realize that there is a lot of taxes. We're not just raising revenue, you're being taxed. That's it. Because when I was mayor, I would often take out my wallet, and because it borderlines on a prop, I won't. But all money that gets spent by government comes from someone's wallet. Either it's at the pump, or when something is delivered to your house, or any number of the other ways that you've got money getting tucked into this bill. That's problematic. And I sat and listened to Representative Kraft's presentation in state government finance, and I think then again in Ways and Means. But I want to talk about the bill that he has tucked in here, because I want to once again level set what that means. That the Met Council will have input and insight and sometimes oversight onto how cities move forward with their development plans. If this bill becomes law, the Met Council is going to have an opportunity to take away some local control and have veto power on whether zoning is done in a certain way based on how local leaders who were elected by the locals might choose to roll that out. That's in this bill. He just spoke lovingly and praising the existence of this in this bill, not 10 minutes ago. That's a problem. And I will conclude with the commentary that I had from earlier in the week on this notion of Minnesota exceptionalism. Minnesota exceptionalism now can count among its things a 50-cent delivery tax for stuff delivered to your house. Now, I have a lot of kids, and when they're all home, we get things delivered to the house a lot. In fact, I think many of my daughters have, if they gave frequent flyer miles at delivery services like Amazon or Jimmy John's or other, they would have frequent flyer miles. This is going to have an impact on people. I think one of our members talked about how impactful this will be on them, and that these are high on the regressivity meter. I think I might carry a bill to have the regressivity meter added into the Legislative Budget Office. We'll have a little chart on the top of every fiscal note on the regressivity model. This one's way in the hot red part of that spectrum. You know, when we came down here in January, I wasn't sure how bad it would be. You have the trifecta, you have a budget surplus. I thought, well, they'll probably just work within the confines of the budget surplus. Well, we're a day away from adjourning, and obviously that's not the case. And I just think that that's alarming at best, that we not only have seen the expenditure of the $18+ billion surplus, but now we are raising 9.5 yesterday, and now you're raising 3.7 here. And I just think that that's crazy, Chair Hornstein. And you and I have a very cordial working relationship, and I do appreciate that you always take my meetings, and you know, we will chat on the floor, and that you've come out to my district, you've recognized the need for investment in Highway 5 and Highway 7 and Highway 212. But when gas is now $4 a gallon, you know, I was driving home the other day from here, and I sometimes don't always pay attention to the gas gauge, as many of us do. Well, you don't. You don't have to pay attention to the gas gauge. But I got alarmed as I was getting close to being empty. I found a gas station off of Highway 212, and I rolled up to the pump, and gas is over $4 a gallon, and it's about to get even more expensive. Again, we'll peg out the regressivity meter on this gas tax. So while there are things that I am grateful exist in this bill, I urge members to vote no, as I will. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill is really about misplaced priorities. Not necessarily all of the contents of this bill, but the misplaced priorities of this session. And this weekend being an especially devastating week for the residents of Minnesota, for taxpayers, and for people who want to enjoy the great outdoors. This has been a very devastating session, and it's all about where our priorities are at. And you know, frankly, campaigning across rural central Minnesota this last year, I heard a lot about people saying, well, with this massive surplus, why not just, you know, if you can't get the Democratic Party to agree to lower taxes, why don't you just stuff all that money into infrastructure? Why don't you just put it into our roads and bridges across the state, help people get around? We were dealing with a lot of potholes, and we have a lot of needs, local community needs, statewide, interstates, and otherwise. Why don't we just use that money one time? Can we just get the Democratic Party, can we just get them on board to spend this money on roads and bridges? Well, I'm sorry to the people of Minnesota, the answer is no. The answer is no. With a nearly $20 billion budget surplus, this legislature could not find that money for transportation. And instead, Minnesotans were sorry. Despite the fact that Democrats claim that they lowered taxes yesterday for a middle-class family in my district, and I have examples, simply increasing the gas tax, the way that we're doing in this bill, will result in double the rebate. It will result in double the rebate check that you were planning to send to that middle-class family in my district. Very specifically, there's a resident of Piers who happens to be a teacher with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe and travels from Piers. They're a native member themselves. They travel from Piers to Onamia to teach the kids there. That teacher who lives in Piers travels a round trip 60 miles every day. Calculating out the time that they spend in the classroom every year and not accounting for any amount of travel that they take during the summer, it will cost them $500 more every year simply from the gas tax increase. If you're a nurse living in Swanville, traveling to the nearest hospital, whether in Long Prairie or Little Falls, and you work a full-time schedule, it will be an additional $500 every year just for this gas tax increase. If you're a teacher's assistant and teacher aide, working in the classroom, helping our teachers, and then assisting in an additional amount as a community development director in Ogilvie, but you live in Elk River, it's an additional $562 every year with this gas tax increase. Because of the blackout bill passed this session, my constituents who currently go to work at Sherco and currently travel 90 miles to and from work every day, not only will they be losing their job, but before they lose their job, they will be paying an additional $1,125 per year. The union member that goes to work at Sherco. All of this, while the majority party in Minnesota passes bill after bill and budget item after budget item of wasteful government spending. I did some back-of-the-napkin math on some of the most wasteful projects that we've seen this session, starting with a $500 million palace for politicians that no one could bring any amount of restraint to. And right next to that state office building, this bill places $25 million for a gold-plated road leading up to the state office building. Then, because of actions that this legislature is taking with this bill, a $1 billion train to Duluth. That Warren Buffett could deliver himself. So who's the benefit there? Warren Buffett or the Minnesotans paying the price of $500 additional every single year just in gas taxes? Or how about the over $1 billion given this year to nonprofits across this state? It's amazing, really, how the interest of state government could give $1 billion to nonprofits. These are misplaced priorities. Oh, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned that we're going to be raising tab fees and vehicle registration fees up to 36%. So, especially for the folks in my district, we're pretty modest. We might have a 5-year or older vehicle, like I do, a 2018 Chevy Impala, gets good gas mileage. But with this bill alone, the registration fee increase is over $85 more. $85. So on that very modest vehicle with over 200,000 miles driven, by the way, the tab fee increase goes from $240 to $326 because of this bill. So when the Democratic majority campaigns upon delivering the largest tax cut in state history, ask them, why are my car tab fees going up? Why is my gas tax going up? Why couldn't you prioritize roads and bridges with a near $20 billion budget surplus? And for the people of Minnesota who think that this investment is somehow really prioritizing roads and bridges, Let's talk about the fact that our state government budget in this one budget cycle is increasing by over 40%. Over 40% in one biennium, and this transportation budget with nearly $4 billion of tax increases only increases the transportation budget by 27%. Maybe we should have stopped some of that funding of radical nonprofits that go to work trying to stop jobs in Minnesota. That should have been our priority. But at the end of the day, this is one expensive budget for the people of Minnesota. The largest tax increase in state history, impacting the lives of every single Minnesotan. When we had the money to provide for this core constitutional responsibility of our state, with a near $20 billion budget surplus, the priority wasn't infrastructure. But raising taxes, raising the cost of living for middle-class Minnesotans at a time of record inflation. Not to mention the automatic inflator on gas taxes coming into play based upon the highest point for gas taxes every year in August. Not December, not January or February, but based upon the time when the prices are the highest in the middle of summer. That gas tax is going to go up. So for the nurses and the teachers and the construction men and women who live in my district, I'm voting no, because I don't want to see their family budget crushed under the weight of a 40% increase in state spending.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to congratulate Chair Hornstein on crafting the most comprehensive transportation bill in living memory. I don't think there's ever been a bill quite this comprehensive, even under the aegis of your mentor, Bernie leader. So congratulations. So I have a couple of provisions in this bill as well that illustrate that. One of them being what we have dubbed the Bill Dooley Bicycle Safety Act. This is a bill that I actually picked up from the retired Representative Connie Bernardi. When she retired last year, she didn't want to see her years of work on this issue go by the wayside, and she asked me to pick up where she left off, and so I'm very happy that we're getting this one across the finish line as well. Bill was a passionate and tireless advocate for cycling safety and active transportation in Minnesota. After he retired from his career as an insurance lobbyist in 1955, he turned his attention to advocating for healthy, active transportation alternatives. He was a longtime member of the Major Taylor Bike Club, where he was advocated for increased participation of bicycling among the communities of color. He was a founder of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota and the Minneapolis Bicycle Advisory Committee, and the chair of the Twin Cities Shared Mobility Cooperative. He worked for years helping to plan, strategize, and make a case in a bipartisan way for policies and funding that would make biking, walking safer and more convenient. So included among the provisions in the bill are provisions which require bike safety programs in public schools, adding 2 bike routes to the state bicycle route network, including one that will be named in honor of Congressman Oberstar, who was an avid, lifelong cyclist himself. It allows what's called the Idaho stop, a rolling stop for bicyclists through stop signs, and makes a variety of other changes to the rules of the road that will make cycling more safety, including requiring cars to give more leeway to bicyclists when they're passing on the roadway. So. And I would like to, if he were here, to give a call out to Representative Lilly as well, because he has also advocated for years for bicycle safety as well. A second provision that I've been working on for the last 5 years, when I was a freshman, Chair Hornstein and then Senate Chair Newman assigned Senator Jasinski and I to pick up the cause of making sure that there was adequate funding for the state's deputy registrars. And this issue has been around long enough that I know that Representative Torkelson and Representative Peterson have worked on this before me as well. And this has been a slow process. We the legislature commissioned a study, independent expert review study 2 years ago to come up with recommendations. They returned their recommendations last year, and we crafted a bill that addressed the issue of driver and vehicle services comprehensively. And we thought we had a deal at the end of the session, and then we ended up with nothing. And so we brought it back this year, and this year we're going to get it across the finish line. This is personal to me. While we were sorting this out, the Driver and Vehicle Services Deputy Registrar's office in Bloomington closed because it was losing $300,000 a year. And so now we go to Hennepin County Service Center, and we know that Hennepin County has been subsidizing its driver and vehicle services operations to the tune of about $2.5 million a year. And that's common, that magnitude of subsidy is common in counties and cities across the state. So very happy to be supporting the bill as a whole, and happy that we were able to get these two provisions into the bill. And then before I give up the mic, I want to address Representative Schultz's comments, because I've done the math. And the average driver driving an average number of miles in a car getting the average gas mileage pays about $125 a year in total in gas taxes right now, with the state gas tax at 28.5 cents a gallon. And with the inflation adjustment, within a couple of years, the price of the amount of the gas tax might increase by maybe 3, 4, 5 cents. You are talking about adding $1 or $2 a month to the amount of that people will pay in additional gas taxes under this bill. So I don't know where Representative Schultz is getting his numbers. I'd like to have his calculator and be able to calculate my interest rates on it. But the magnitude of this increase is a fraction of what's been stated on this floor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I will not take a long time, I promise you that. We do need transportation. We do have to prioritize transportation. Roads and bridges are always important in my book. And I was just wondering, Mr. Speaker, if Ann New Brindley would yield to a question.
She will yield, Representative O'Driscoll. Nope, she will not yield, Representative O'Driscoll.
For the record, Ann New Brindley will not be speaking on this particular topic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm standing because the chair invoked my name. He didn't do the full Beetlejuice, so I'll just have a few points to talk to. For about a decade, I've been trying hard to do transit smarter, more efficiently. It hurts me every time I see mostly empty, fixed route transit, because it's not surviving the new age. Let me put it this way. People younger than me are used to grabbing their phone, using an app, and having something happen, or efficiently getting something. We need to have our transit adaptable, that microtransit so that we can use the efficiencies that FedEx and other entities do, of where every day they don't know where they're going to go until they get the report, and then they schedule the shortest routes, the most timely, efficient routes, and we should be using that kind of technology to help our citizens. Our older citizens, oftentimes, it's difficult to get to the fixed route and et cetera, and microtransit can allow for them to be effectively picked up. If you go to a electric vehicle, in the software you can have it understand when they need to be charged and switch out to a fully charged one, and we can save a lot of time, do a better product, and use less energy, no matter what form it is. That's why I'm pleased that they included microtransit in this bill, and I think it's very timely for Rochester because Rochester's been growing pretty quick, and it's evolving its transit system, its roads, etc., and this will be an aid to do the best, most efficient route and service for that community. They've already tested an autonomous bus to see what might be possible in the future. So transit, instead of all of these, we've got the bus running on this schedule, it's fixed, and you've got to get to that route, and there's not that flexibility or responsiveness, and it runs empty, I would say, most of the time. Same thing for trains. I think there are a few generations that have been around for trains. I hope that we can get to new technology and better technology. I heard someone early on talking about global greenhouse gases and et cetera. If you are concerned about global, that means the entire planet. And even though we say, well, we're not going to be burning fossil fuels if we use the cars, well, just the mining for the batteries, which lasts just a few years, produces more greenhouse gases than an efficient fueled vehicle or fuel cells and et cetera. We need to stop looking at what's bright and shiny and start looking at the whole picture and do a better job. Talking about a better job, we should not have any FTEs needed to calculate what there should be a charge for electric vehicles. You take the total number of vehicles. It took me less than 2 minutes to get that number for the state of Minnesota. You take the total amount of sales or gas tax paid the previous year. You divide one by the other, and that's the average, and you assign that for the electric vehicle as their appropriate proportionality to the gas tax contribution. And it would take maybe 5 minutes to do, and wouldn't take any FTEs. And the other thing is already downgraded because part of the total number of vehicles are electric and alternative. So it's already smaller than what the average would be. So we get creative in ways of assessing, but that'd be an easy way to do it. I think, it's $75 now or something? Last time I looked at, it's around $200 for if it was this calculation, and that'd be a fair assessment. Okay, for many hardworking citizens, I've had a lot of people talk to me about we've been saving and budgeting and we got a new car. And it was an exciting thing for the family. And they had the budget and they knew that it would work. It's gotten tougher with the inflation and the cost of everything going up. And now they're going to be surprised with a huge increase when they register and get their tabs. And frankly, I think that's not a great way of doing it. And that's not fair, because we're saying you worked hard, you planned, you got that vehicle that you've been waiting for, and now we're going to charge you 30%, whatever it is, more, and it's unexpected costs just popping up. So let's just think about the global impact of things we do. Think about the fact that instead of replacing all these bridges that need to be done, we're diverting millions and millions and millions and, well, hundreds of millions of money into things that are fixed route, inefficient, underutilized, and let's spend the money better. So I won't be supporting this bill. It's making some inroads into newer ways of doing it, but it's still not the right solution for our citizens. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I wasn't going to talk on this, but I couldn't help myself. And I think Representative Hornstein is the one of the most popular guys in here. I can't wait to work with you on a bill. So that being said, yesterday and today we've heard, we constantly hear, transformational, historic. I think we need to put transformational this session, Mr. Speaker. It means the act of demanding taxes. Historic is literally the act of spending those taxes. And maybe I should add haphazardly. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. There are some good things in your bill, Representative Hornstein. There really are. But I think you were run over by a bunch of activists that wanted to push their agenda for something that's not ready. And we don't have to look very far. I'm not going to talk about the $1 billion in tax increases. We've heard it all. We don't like that. We think it's too much. We think we could have done something with less. I wish that I could have, voted for something like this, truly. It's very metro-centric, and I think that's a little bit bad. I mean, it's good for me, but I think that's a little bit tough in greater Minnesota. I do like the additional money for small cities. I think that's great. But there's nothing in this bill that's going to eliminate poverty, which I heard. There's nothing in this bill that's going to cure climate change. I'm sorry, Representative Kraft. I'm not going to go into our debate again. But, this is, and there's nothing in this bill that's going to stop derailments. Those are all things that I heard that this bill is going to do. And I heard that Northern Lights, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. Well, it's an opportunity, but with all due respect, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hornstein, we better figure out a better way to build rail lines than what we've got now. We only have to look about 8 miles that way. It is a debacle. It's a debacle everywhere. So as I was going, I only made it to page 181, and I got to trip managers and standards on cleanliness and the goofy climate change stuff, and then the prohibited activities. There should be, there's prohibited activities on light rail and on buses. If they're smoking pot, are they going to be on an automatic expungement? I don't know. I mean, that was in a bill a couple of days ago. We got standards on cleanliness. The legislature is mandating that the Met Council establish a standard on cleanliness. This is so far beneath us. This is like, telling somebody who owns a nonprofit that houses low-income people that they've got to, go in there and clean the house, clean their rooms. This is so disrespectful, in my opinion, to an agency that collects millions and millions of dollars and does its best, I think. I don't think they have I don't think they want to do things wrong. I really don't. But it is messed up when the legislature has to ask them to build standards of cleanliness. And the trip managers, members, I don't know if you guys read this, and I don't mind it. I work downtown. I think that there's a lot of issues with downtown right now. We've got some rebuilding to do. Trust with law enforcement, trust with civic leaders. We have a lot to do. I'll do everything I can to help, for sure. But I looked at the trip managers and the civil process with a mediator, and that non-payers who hop turnstiles, or wait, they don't hop turnstiles, but they can be sent to collection agencies. In the 4th Judicial District, we're trying to get rid of bail. And we're going to send these people to collection? I just don't understand the inconsistencies in the policy, which makes me think that you were forced to do things that you probably didn't want to do. That's my hope. And maybe you didn't. And again, I don't mean to be disrespectful at all. But this bill, this is an expensive bill. And it's going to fall on low-income people the worst. It's going to fall on my parents, 83 years old. They live in the same house that I grew up in. Their property tax, it's Medina, so you guys can maybe make fun of me, but they live in Medina. My dad bought that house in 1959 for $11,000. Now he pays more than that in property taxes every year. He was a lineman for NSP his whole life. We're increasing what we're charging people like my mom and dad, 83 years old. My dad will die if he can't stay there. And I was very appreciative. I don't know who did it, but somebody put a increase in the tax bill. And I was going to stand and say it, but there's too many speakers. They increased that the adjusted gross income from 60 to 96. I'm trying to get my mom, and what it does is it locks your property taxes where they are. I tried to get my dad to do it years ago, but of course he's an old-fashioned guy, and he says, I don't want a tax lien on my property. He's an old-fashioned guy. If we increase the amount of money that he's got to pay, he'll get by. He'll spend less. That's what he does. He spends less because he prioritizes and he balances. And that's what this bill, members, didn't do. It said, look at all this stuff that we can be transformational. We can put climate change. We can force these things in the Met Council. We can increase all these taxes. We can load all these counties with money, which is great. They got to match it. So it's increased taxes, which is wonderful. But this bill goes too far, it's too heavy, and it's too hurtful for the people that don't have the money to pay for it. I've said before that I do some work with nonprofit service providers. Transportation is the most important thing to get people in day services to their employment. The most important thing. And hopefully Representative Knorr addressed a little bit of that in his DWRS bill yesterday, which what I saw, I liked it. It was good. I voted for that provision. But this is going to hurt those providers yet again. We just keep loading up the basket, people, because we can't restrain ourselves. There's a balance we have to find, and we didn't find it here. And for that reason, I can't vote for the bill, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time, and again, thank you, Representative Hornstein. I think you worked hard, and I appreciate what you do.
I recognize the member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will try not to take too much time. This is a large bill, and there's lots of interesting things to talk about. Many of them have been covered already. First off, I have to express my appreciation that the corridors of commerce language is included in the bill. I'd like to Representative Hornstein, Representative Cagle, I know you fought hard to keep that in mostly in the kind of condition it was when I authored it, and I do appreciate that. The objective, of course, is that Corridor of Commerce is a good program that attracts investment from legislators. It's constructed in a way that all legislators from whatever district have a chance to benefit in their part of the state so that we don't end up with an unbalanced allocation as we had a few years ago. We'll see how that goes. It gives the department a little more flexibility as to how they administer the program. And if it works well, it will attract attention from legislators, and more money will be going to roads and bridges across the state of Minnesota. Representative Nadeau, you kind of stole my thunder on the Met Council cleaning provisions in here. I was so surprised to see, and I've got some misgivings about Met Council, I really do, and some of the things they've done in recent history, but I thought they actually did know how to clean, but in the bill, it defines cleaning. Means the removal of litter, refuse, food, glass, here's an important one, bodily fluids, offensive odors, and other debris. Well, I'm so happy that we are now letting Met Council know what dirt is, I guess. Mind-boggling, honestly, that they don't know how to clean, apparently, but we'll study it and we'll see if they can get the job done. On a more serious note, a little bit about gas tax. Why not raise the gas tax? You're doing it, but I do think it's a mistake. Minnesota has a gas tax that is pretty much right where it should be when we look at our neighbors. North Dakota is lower at 23 cents. South Dakota is lower at 28 cents. Iowa and Wisconsin are both just a little bit higher at 31 cents. We're at 29 right now. The average of that 5-state area is 28.4 cents. We're about where we should be. So what happens when you raise the gas tax? Number one, it takes money out of people's pockets, right? Those that buy gas and need to get where they want to go are going to spend more. And the second thing it does is it puts us out of balance with other states. So if you're a cross-country truck driver and you're driving toward Minnesota, you're going to go through Minnesota, you're probably going to fill up those tanks before you cross the border. That means not only do you stop and buy the fuel in another state, you also buy all those other things you buy at the truck stop. If you've been to a modern truck stop, you know how much they have to offer. And we are putting up a wall. We're saying, hey, truckers, get your gas in South Dakota or get your gas in Wisconsin. And by the way, these modern trucks have plenty of fuel capacity to drive all the way across the state of Minnesota nonstop as long as they're not going over their logbook amounts. Then on top of that, we're raising the registration taxes that we pay on our vehicles. Again, taking money out of the pockets of drivers. Why is this a problem? It's a problem in my mind because our transportation system benefits everyone. Whether you own a car, drive a car, or not, you benefit from the transportation system because this is the system that gets everything we use, whether it's your food or your clothing or the stuff that's going to the nursing home, we all benefit. And therefore, as we started in 2017, we should be tapping into the general fund. It makes perfect sense. We all benefit. We all pay to the general fund. And I'm glad to see at least we haven't eliminated the contribution that the general fund makes, but we should have looked to that for more revenue rather than just diving into the pockets of drivers. And by the way, the gas tax in and of itself doesn't have a great future. We know manufacturers are going to make more electric vehicles. We're going to see a higher percentage of electric vehicles on the road. the effectiveness of the gas tax is going to decrease over time. The other topic I'd like to spend a little time on is the relationship between Minnesota's transportation system and our railroads. We depend on our railroads to get bulk goods to and from where they're needed. And it's good for our roads, frankly, when we do that, because when we put bulk goods on the rail, it's a lot less wear and tear on our highway system. Heavy trucks are great. I own a couple of them myself to get my farm goods to market. But when we can put those goods on the railroad and get them off of our highways, it lengthens the life of those road surfaces, cuts down on traffic, and improves safety. But we have a very uneven history of dealing with railroads. Take, for instance, the Botno line that's being planned in North Minneapolis. There was an assumption made by Met Council that they could just run with the Class 1 railroad. No problem, we can do that. Well, they forgot to ask the Class 1 railroad. They found out that, oh, the Class 1 railroad has a lot of authority. They can't just do whatever they want. So the route has to change. They can't share that corridor. Let's take a look at Southwest Light Rail. Yeah, great project, or not, yeah, Southwest Light Rail. So they're building this project and they've got a budget, and all of a sudden, oh, we've got to run parallel to the Class 1 railroad as we enter downtown Minneapolis. And by the way, the Class 1 railroad says, if you're going to do that, folks, you've got to put up a crash wall. I forget the price tag, somewhere around $100 million. That was unanticipated, but could have been anticipated had we talked with the Class 1 railroad. And then how about the corridor, the Kenilworth corridor? I've spent a lot of my life, I feel, talking about the Kenilworth corridor, but we have a freight railroad through there, a short line, not a Class 1 railroad, that we have imposed on. We've decided that we're going to run light rail in parallel with this short line railroad. We've imposed on them, and it's been a big problem, besides all the big problems in Southwest Light Rail. But now in this bill, we're going to impose on them some more. We're going to force them, we're going to tell them what they have to do for crews on their train when they have got a great safety record. It's a solution looking for a problem. So then we get to the new railroad project as we head north toward Duluth. I don't know, but I don't believe, from what I've heard, that they've sat down with the Class 1 railroad, whose line they're going to run on, to discuss just what the Class 1 railroad's needs and rights are as we head towards Duluth with this passenger rail system. I think we're going to see the price tag shoot up dramatically. That rail is going to have to be improved dramatically to handle a high-speed train. It's not ready, it's going to be costly, and you better sit down and talk with the Class 1 railroad before you start committing all these state assets to a project that could very easily end up another boondoggle, just like Southwest Light Rail. There's many more things in this bill that I could talk about. They've been covered by other members. Raising these burdens on our state drivers at a time when we have this huge surplus just makes no sense to me. Increasing the gas tax just is taking money out of drivers' pockets along with the registration fees going up. And then finally, the 50-cent delivery tax. You know, Minnesota has this extremely complicated sales tax system where some things are taxed and other things aren't taxed, and candy bars and other, you know, I don't understand it. But apparently in this bill, if you buy over $100 worth of, or I'm not sure how it works, but anyway, you're going to pay a fee if you throw in one taxed item in the bag. All of a sudden, you've got to pay the 50-cent fee. It's stupidly complicated. Why are we doing this? It doesn't seem like a very good idea. Members, please vote red.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Hornstein, favorite Democrat hands down. Just got to get that out of the way before I say all these mean things. This bill spends $8 billion more. $8 billion more. And we all agree that transportation is a core function of government. It is. So when you talk to somebody, they think that we're putting all this money towards transportation, but we're really not. Less than 1% of the general fund is put towards transportation. So this bill spends $8 billion, but not from the money we already have. We have $20 billion budget surplus, a $20 billion budget surplus, and instead of using that money, which I guarantee you is what the Minnesotans expected us to do here, instead of using that money, this bill raises taxes by $3.7 billion. It's insane. After this increase, it's a 1% increase in the metro-wide sales tax. After back-to-back years of 8 to 9% inflation, literally the stuff you paid for 3 years ago is going to be 10% more expensive after this bill passes. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but when everything is 10% more expensive, that destroys middle-class families, and especially people who don't have excess money to spend. And one frustration, while this bill spends money on a lot of good things, it spends $200 million on a train to Duluth. $200 million. And the projections of that are very rosy, but we've had train projections before, and they don't always turn out as we'd hope. Just look at the extra billions we have on Southwest Light Rail. But more important for my community in Anoka County, the projections for North Star were great. It was going to be such a great thing that everybody can go down to Minneapolis and see a Twins game and not drive their cars, commute to work. Less than 500 people a day use North Star Light Rail. Hundreds of millions of dollars has been spent on that. Less than 500 people a day. In fact, in my local paper, May 19th, North Star is costing $18 million a year and getting $500,000 in revenue. So for the taxpayers in Anoka County, $17.5 million is being lost year after year after year. And so you say, well, if it hardly helps anybody and it's this expensive, well, why do we keep it around? Well, if we kill it, if we dismantle it, we have to return the federal money. And that's the thing about federal money, where the Democrats say we need to spend $200 million on a train to Duluth so we can secure this federal money. Yes, that's sweet, sweet cash. But in the words of the venerable commander, Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. This will be a burden on Minnesota taxpayers for years and years and years, and we'll never be able to undo it. No matter how much money it's losing, we'll never be able to turn it down, because then we'd have to pay back that federal money. Federal money is not always a good thing. There's always strings attached. So we're spending all this money. We have the money to spend, but instead of spending that money, raising taxes by $3.7 billion. Sales tax, 30% increase in tab fees, increasing license fees, increasing the sales tax on your car, a delivery tax, and then an automatic increase in the gas tax in perpetuity. When we have $20 billion, this is not what Minnesotans thought. I guarantee you it's not what they thought would happen, even when they elected Democrats. And it makes me think there's an animal in the animal kingdom that can eat until it literally its stomach ruptures. It's a sheep. And what I see here, Democrats are feasting and feasting and feasting on taxpayer dollars, and they don't know when to stop. And I guarantee you next year, when we're in a massive deficit, we'll have to clean up their guts all over the floor because they didn't know how to stop eating. This is going to be brutal for taxpayers. It's going to be brutal for years to come. It's going to be especially hard on middle and lower class families. While there's some good spending in this bill, a $3.7 billion tax increase, when we have $20 billion in the bank, that's not what Minnesotans expect us to do here.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to first start off by echoing the words that Chair Hornstein had indicated earlier during his first comment. In the last 11 years, I have been on every transportation committee that has been in the House, and I think he has been as well. And over that time, we have developed a mutual friendship that has grown to also mutual respect and of integrity as well. And so I always have appreciated that. And I think because of that, we have a great working relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that we agree on everything. Matter of fact, there's quite a few differences that we have, but that doesn't mean we can't discuss them and work together. As in regards to the conference committee, over the last week or so, I've been listening to everybody complain about the process and how everything has not worked and now it's not transparent, et cetera. But I thought I was in a different legislature compared to what I've understood and learned through the conference committee that Chair Hornstein has. As a matter of fact, I would recommend for all of us in here, whether we're current or future chairs, to use Chair Hornstein as a mentor for how a transportation a conference committee should work. We even had open meetings and a testimony last night during our last meeting. It was very good. Now, that doesn't mean I think this bill is great. I mean, there are going to be some differences that you'll hear in a little bit, but I do appreciate that working relationship. There are some thank yous that we've already talked about, Enid Swaggart and Jenny Nash on the DFL side, Joe Marble on my side, who makes me look a whole lot better than I am for that. Matt Burris and Andy Lee, that over the last week and a half, I'm not sure got 10 hours of sleep. They really worked hard. I appreciate that. And of course, our GOP transportation team. Those of you that are there, we worked together and we had a lot of discussions and so forth, and I appreciate that. I want to first start off by talking about the parts in the bill that I think are good, and there are some ones that I think has worthy of discussion. First of all, corridors of commerce, and you heard Representative Torkelson talk about that. So the Corridors of Commerce program got started in 2013, my first term here, underneath Chair Hornstein as well. And the first few go-arounds, they were all shovel-ready programs, et cetera. And then we decided that there needed to be a selection process in which we gave to the department to actually create. Well, that first go-around was controversial at best, shall we say. And so there was a need for us to really figure out how we can better create that selection process. Representative Torkelson worked for 3 years putting that together, talking with the Department of Transportation and all of the people around, the county commissioners, intercounty as well, and come up with a plan that I thought was very good. We were unable to get it past the goal line last year, but we worked diligently again this year and got it in the bill with very few modifications. And I think it's a very good program. So thank you, Representative Torkelson, for all of your work. That was a really good job. The other part that I really think is important in this bill is the Met Council has come under a lot of scrutiny and controversy over this past few years, specifically in related to Southwest Light Rail, but not only that, and to the point where I think there is some question about whether or not the Met Council, or at least its structure, is the best MPO to be used for federal funds and so forth. And so this bill does have a legislatively driven task force to really look at what is that structure for to best suit Minnesota and best suit our needs in the metropolitan area moving forward. There's a lot of things to consider, and so I think that's a really important piece for us to consider. The other part is deputy registrars. There is one-time money in the bill to help offset some of the losses that they had over the many years. After we started MNLARS, there was a great loss of income, of assets People is dipping into their savings accounts in order to stay abreast. And whereas I wish it could be a little bit more, I believe there's $6 million to be distributed. That will help. There are some all other fees in there that are a little bit more controversial, but at least that part is fine. The other thing is, of course, I know the investment is needed for transportation, and so I like the fact that we have significant dollars in it. But here's where things, I think, start going a little bit awry from my perception in my direction. Because I think there are some clunkers, or at least some things that may not be the best for us moving into the future. The chair talked about that there is no better investment than our investment in transportation. And yet I might caution us a little bit to say, but if that investment requires us first taking the money from you to put it in, it's not really an investment. It's just something that we're asking you to pay for. And so I think that needs to keep that in mind. The one thing that I was surprised most going through the conference committee, because up till about a week ago, I had thought that the gas tax increase was off the table. And lo and behold, it came in. And one of the things that happened was realizing that this bill and what we proposed is a 27% increase in overall spending in programs and everything that's there. And we only had $1 billion in a target from the general fund. Well, 27% requires almost $2 billion. So we needed to have, I understand that there was need for additional revenue sources, but that did surprise me. And so we will deal with that. We'll see how that goes. I disagree with it, and so we'll figure that out. Basically, this bill, every fee, every tax that is available for the Public Transportation Committee and even Public Safety has been increased in one way or another. I mean, virtually every one. That's a challenge because some are higher and some aren't. Tab fees, for example, over the average course of the life of a car is going to be raised about 36%. Now, I understand that through the gradation that the biggest percentage of that increase is in the first 6 years of the car's life, but overall, we're still talking about a 36% increase. We talk about the delivery tax, and we talk about the sales tax. All of them are very regressive. They are very important for people, and I know I can tell you what the chair is going to say about regressivity, but the point is that they are regressive. It is a good thing that we're getting rebate checks. You know why? Because those of you listening, don't spend it, put it in your savings account, because in the next 2 years, all of these increases are going to be more than use it all up. It's not free because we're recollecting it in just a different way. So really remember that these taxes and increases are there. What surprised me the most, and on top of some of the other things, is the fact that the Department of Transportation, as well as engineers and others, are saying and projecting that the Department of Transportation is about $2 billion a year short in funding its needs. And yet, we're only getting about half of that. With all these increases, only about half of it is going to go to roads and bridges. Only about less than $1 billion. I think about $700 million or so is going to actually roads and bridges. More is going into the trunk highway fund, okay? But we're paying for things like the helicopter, the 2 airplanes, safety counts, and a lot of other things are coming out of that trunk highway fund. So when it really gets down to roads and bridges, there's a whole lot less than what we need. And that is a concern for me as well. We've got the Safety Council, we've got environmental programs and other things in this bill in which we're using up infrastructure dollars and dollars that we should be putting towards that. I want to remind us all that the three main responsibilities of the state is K-12 education, infrastructure, which are roads and bridges and buildings, and public safety. And here we are, again, kind of starving our infrastructure, especially in roads and bridges, for some of the other things. I want to get to the sales tax for a minute, because the sales tax was generated mainly to supplement transit. And it by far is the most regressive tax of any of them. And yet, very little of it is going to help with the public safety on transit. I believe we just had another death at a station last night in there. And what are we doing? No, Representative Tapke has a plan out there, and I think it's a good start. But I'm not sure that we're at the point where now having people get on trains and buses and say, "Pretty please stop," is going to help. I've been pushing for a more aggressive way of dealing with that safety, because when it gets to be the point where it's at, it's going to take more than just a gradual build into it. So we really haven't done as good a job as I think as possible. I am concerned about something that has been talked about earlier today, and that is all transit. It's not just rail, it's not just buses either. We're having an issue in regards to fare box with ridership. Right now, the latest report, and I understand it's a little over a month old, the fare box recovery was anywhere from 2 to 10%. I want to say that again, between 2 and 10%. But let's just assume that that's off, and we'll get ridership back to where it's 20%. I want to give you a visual of what that means. 20% fare box recovery means that if you are paying $5 for that fare, and maybe that's a round trip fare, whatever, if it's $5 because it's easy to figure, what that means is that your grandmother that sits at home through their sales tax now, as well as their property tax, has to pay $5. The local business has to pay $5. Your uncle has to pay $5. The neighbor down the street has to pay $5 so that you can have that $5 ride, okay? 4 other people are paying the same as you to ride that. That's what a subsidy is. And to me, we have to be very careful about continually to expand the programs that require more and more subsidy compared to those that want to purchase it. And as an example, let me just tell you this. Do you know what the fare box recovery is on trunk highways? Well, there is no fare box recovery, you say. Well, let's compare it to, okay, so who pays for 100% of the construction of trunk highways? Now, I'm not talking about the entire system. I'm only talking about the 11,000 miles that is responsible of the state. Who pays 100% of that? The people that drive cars through their gas taxes and sales tax and license tap fees. Who pays 100% of the equipment to ride on that? Again, the same people. Who pays 100% of the maintenance and the personnel to drive it? Again, the same people. And then when you add on top of that, some of those dollars that are raised by them get pushed off onto also counties and state and townships, as well as some into transit. The fare box recovery for those that are driving on trunk highways is in excess of 100%. 100% and more. No, I've heard some people say yes, but other roads get subsidized through property taxes, et cetera. Don't disagree there. However, guess who also pays those property taxes? The same people who drive on the roads. Okay? So the point is that we have to figure out, what's going on with how we fund that. Even worse for me is the fact that we are in the middle of a change in people's behavior in regards to transportation. Post-COVID now, we have a report coming due that's going to analyze how people's behavior is in regards to how they ride the trains and rail. Until that's done, I have real concerns about us investing in other programs that are that same way. And so I think it's important for us to be cautious about investing into a program that may be outdated even when it gets finished. Trains and safety, I want to touch base a little bit about, because on the other side we heard about how they need 2 more inspectors in order to keep us safe. Well, the National Transportation Foundation did a study on hazardous material and accidents, and they looked at the 4 transportation processes, agencies. So they looked at water, they looked at air, They looked at trains, and they looked at trucks and other things across the road. Well, water had virtually no hazardous material accidents. Trains were the next with only just a handful. Airports and airplanes were the next with more than 3 times as many as trains. And trucks on the road just ballooned all the rest at like about 80% of all the accidents. The thing to remember is the state wanted these inspections. The railroad company already has their inspectors. These additional inspectors are not paid for by the state. They're being forced to be paid for by the trains. And we can talk about that, the need for safety, but that's a piece that we have to consider, is that how can you say you're investing in safety when you ask somebody else to do it that is doubling and just making more work for everybody? I have also great concerns about some of the train programs that they want to go up to Duluth and Fargo-Moorhead and all the others, because federal preemption says that trains are underneath the control of the trains and federal government, not the state. And we're being told by the railroads that these tracks are not ready for passenger rail. They're not. Who's going to come up with that bill? We don't know that. So the question is, I have a lot of questions, but what is the future of our funding for transportation? We know that gas tax is never going to be the answer anymore. It's not. We didn't even talk about electric vehicles and how that hasn't changed, increased in those fees. But the reality is that we're going to have to figure out a different way of funding it. Because we constitutionally dedicated the funding sources many years ago, it has been put on the back burner of importance. Transportation can no longer be there. It has to come to the priorities in front of us. So we're going to have to start figuring out where we're going to get the funding into the future, because what we're doing currently will not keep pace. I don't have the answer yet, but I do think we need to keep in mind that the Department of Transportation, which was originally designed for just dealing with the infrastructure, is now also responsible for providing the service, which is completely different, and yet we still haven't changed majorly the funding mechanism. So in closing, I would say to Mr. Chair that I appreciate what you've done, and I know that this is a bill that you've really been pushing for a long time, and it gets to do a lot of the things that you dreamed of. But I have many concerns for where this will put us into the future. There are certainly priorities in here that are more of your priorities than what I would put in. I would certainly have prioritized the funding. I would have really asked for more money from the general fund, which I think is appropriate. But overall, I have to commend at least you on being able to put together a very transparent bill, one that I've appreciated working with you, but I unfortunately will have to request a no vote. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So I just want to address a couple of things today. Just because we can't solve 100% of all the problems doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And so I just don't understand that mentality of just because we can't solve everything, we shouldn't try to solve some things. North Star is commuter rail, not LRT, Representative West. And I watch a lot of sci-fi movies and futuristic, movies, and there's always trains in the future. They even build them on asteroids in the expanse. I don't understand. I think trains will be around for a while. They're also, this bill will create a ton of infrastructure jobs and good paying jobs. So Representative Zalesnikar, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, maybe instead of getting that fourth crappy paying job, some of our trades are probably going to be looking for a lot of construction members and a lot of jobs to fill. So pretty excited about that. Representative Petersburg, you said Jenny Nash. It's Jennifer Nelson. Just wanted to make sure that she gets her call out here. And they both do bonding, so I can see how that's confusing. So one thing is that transportation funding, there's no budget surplus in transportation funding, and I want to draw everybody's attention to this letter from LIUNA, but there is no budget surplus in transportation funding. Over the next 20 years, Minnesota faces a $30 billion funding shortfall just to maintain our roads, bridges, and transit. With more than $1 billion per year in new long-term and dedicated revenue, this House file is a major step forward in fixing and catching up on our transportation infrastructure. That is what we need to do. We need to catch up. We need to maintain our roads. And then to the road maintenance fee. I mentioned in my opening speech, or in my opening comments, I was a little disappointed in this. And the reason I was disappointed in it is because, we put a $100 minimum on it, and there's lots of carve-outs in it now. So you'll be all happy to know you can order $1,000 worth of pizza and there's no delivery fee. All food is exempt. All sales tax items are exempt, except for clothes because of, those crop tops from Target. And so we are making real investments. And I also want to draw attention to the fact that these delivery services, their business model is built off of a system that we maintain. We maintain the system that they are using as part of their business model. And a lot of times, the folks that are delivering these goods to our doors are gig workers. They're using their own vehicles to do this. I pay $139 a year for Prime, for Amazon Prime. In the road maintenance fee, Amazon can take part of my Prime membership and use that to pay the delivery fees. If I were to order groceries from Hy-Vee right now, and I wanted them today, it would cost me $19.99. If I wanted to wait 2 days to get them, it'd cost me $10. And Hy-Vee can take that 50 cents out of that fee that they're already charging to send me my groceries. Small businesses are exempt as well. And so I just want to say that I know Minnesotans are sensible people, and I know that they know we get what we pay for. And I'm sick of not getting very much. So I just really want to thank the chair, want to thank Team Transpo, Matt, Burris is amazing. I'm always mystified by the way his mind works and really want to know his opinion. Andy is the most amazing person with spreadsheets and has really awesome hair. Enid, of course, is just amazing, and I've been so lucky to get to know her. And Jennifer Nelson as well, a constituent of mine now, and so I'm really excited to get to work with her. Anna, my CA for Sustainable Infrastructure Committee, she made me feel so confident this entire session and just stood me up and made me feel like I know what I'm doing, and that was really cool. And there's not many girls in this, women in the infrastructure world, so I really appreciate Jennifer and Enid being at our side and kind of being in this trades-dominated world. So, but I really want to thank everybody. This is an amazing bill, and please vote green.
I recognize the member from Stearns, the Minority Leader, Representative Damath.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as we have heard this bill today, there are some definite concerns that you have heard from our side of the aisle. There are good things that we could agree with in the bill. It was also done in a transparent fashion, which we've asked for this entire year as we've worked over the last 5 months, that things would be done in a transparent fashion and allowing the voice of Republicans to be heard, even in conference committee. I was going to tell you that we have a $17.5 billion surplus, but what I'm wondering, or what I'm realizing, is we had a $17.5 billion surplus. We no longer have a $17.5 billion surplus. Instead, in the work of the legislature, we have actually used that up, and we're grabbing for more on every single budget bill, saying to Minnesotans, we had your money. We had $17.5 billion extra of your money, not enough. We're going to double down on that and take a little bit more. In this bill particularly, in the transportation bill, we're going to go ahead and charge Minnesotans $3.9 billion more. Not only, but $1 billion more. We know that there are regressive taxes in this bill. We know when there is a gas tax, that is regressive. We know that when there are license tab fees increased, that is regressive. We know that when there are motor vehicle sales tax increases, that is also regressive. But not only are we going to have a delivery fee that will be the largest in the nation, Democrats in the state of Minnesota are going to double down and make it the most complicated in the nation to keep track of. Certain dollar amounts, not this, we'll tax this, we'll put that delivery fee on these things. We're not going to make it easy in any way, unaffordable and complicated. But we did hear in this chamber from a representative earlier that it was felt that Republicans wanted to abandon public transit. And that is the last thing that we want to do. We agree that public transit is very important. We disagree on what public transit should include. We know trains and rail for public transit is not affordable in the state of Minnesota as it is, and we seem to want to fund things that run over in their cost and their timelines. So adding additional trains to Duluth and beyond is not the right direction to go. Public transit, where, as was heard earlier, a constituent named Joy would not necessarily benefit from public transit in a train form, but individualized buses, things that can be changed and worked around what the needs of Minnesotans actually will be. We also just heard that there's going to be a potential $30 billion shortfall over the next number of years. Well, I can tell you, wasting more money on trains is not the right direction to go if there's going to be a shortfall in our transportation funding. So all of that considered, we saw a headline earlier today that this legislative session is shaking out to be one of the most consequential sessions in state history. Raising taxes, not giving money back to Minnesotans that have actually put us into the position of having a surplus is not the right thing to do for Minnesotans. And with that, members, I would urge a no vote on the transportation bill.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
There we go. Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker and members, really for a good debate today. I really appreciate the kind words from the other side of the aisle. That means a lot to me. You know, one of the things that I enjoy about serving here is just the relationships we have with each other. And I feel really blessed to be a part of this body. And again, particularly on the other side of the aisle today, appreciate those words. And again, on our side, so much support for this bill means a lot. Representative Norris, you really have been the model of what it means to advocate for your community. And yes, you are right. You walked in, you talked about Highway 65, we funded it, and I appreciated the fact that it was a multimodal approach that you took. And so we're very, very excited about the $68 million investment in your district. And many districts on both sides of the aisle have specific projects which I think will benefit everybody. Members, this is a historic generational investment in transportation which will move our state forward in so many ways for decades and decades to come. And when I say generational, I'm thinking a lot about the generations. And we have had just incredible people coming through our committee all session long, and I just want to highlight a couple of them. One is a county commissioner from Pope County named Gordy Wagner, who's been in the transportation business, a small trucking firm. And he's come down several times to talk about the need for long-term sustainable funding for his rural greater Minnesota community, how important it would be for his community. And we mean long-term and sustainable, not just one-time general fund. And that's what we do in this bill, members. That's what we do in this bill. It's balanced regionally and in the different modes of transportation. And I'm so pleased that we were able to do that. So we had Gordy Wagner come several times from Pope County. And then the younger generation showed up. Many young people, particularly interested in the public transportation parts of this bill. MJ Carpio was one of them from an organization called Move Minnesota. Recent college graduate who spoke so eloquently about mobility justice, that this is at its core a social justice issue. And for MJ's generation, they want choices. They want choices, and transit and bike and pedestrian options are in this bill and provide those choices for the generations. And so, members, I ask you to vote green for a truly transformational, historic investment in our infrastructure, which I know will pay dividends for everyone here and for generations to come. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. Thumbs up, yep. Vote green. The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 61 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.